You catch. It's not that hard, okay? All right, get the out of here.
I'm going to talk a lot about drills and fundamentals.
Watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it!
On 93.5
Watch it!
and 107.5.
Boom, baby!
The Fan.
I'm not going to lie to you, Kevin. I thought to myself on the way in, I'll just let Kev do the whole thing, and Boo and I will sit and have extra cereal this morning. Right.
Karen Query's 80th birthday will be forever remembered the day that the world of golf changed for good. Yeah, I think I have 1,037 questions for Will Haskett coming up at 8:30. What a day yesterday for the sport that I love, certainly. 10:01, 10:02, I mean, right? Like literally,
right after we got off the air, literally.
Just as we signed off, I would say my initial shock was, wait a minute. Is the PGA Tour announcing a merge, and boy, you got to love the word merge, with LIV Golf, and they're making the announcement on CNBC? Like, not the Golf Channel, not at a PGA Tour event, not with Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods and Scotty Scheffler sitting up there on a podium. No. CNBC, which I think tells you everything you need to know about what went down here. Obviously, we'll talk about this a ton today. I do think it's a huge day, by the way, for the Pacers and draft workouts, and we could get some clarity on the Isaiah Rodgers situation. We'll chat about that. But Jake, more than anything yesterday, Jay Monahan, PGA Tour commissioner, and I guess CEO of whatever this new entity is going to be, he did what we try to do on the show, and it wasn't the entertainment aspect, it was the educational aspect. And what he educated us with was money doesn't talk, money doesn't win, money is undefeated. No matter how much blood is on that money, it is absolutely undefeated. Soulless, absolute hypocrite, Jay Monahan. Money is undefeated. 72 Dolphins, 76 Hoosiers having a baby, that is money, and that is what we were learned. That's what we found out yesterday. And maybe I should have known that for the previous 32 and a half years of my life.
To me, this is the risk, Kevin, and I want to be careful to not be like, I want to be sensitive to and respectful of, and I mean this sincerely, the passion that golf fans have for the sport. Because I follow golf, obviously. I mean, I work in sports. My dad and my sister are avid golf viewers. They absolutely love it. I know what it means to people. For whatever reason, it's like butter pecan ice cream to me. I know people enjoy it, and it's okay, but I don't go out of my way for butter pecan ice cream.
Yeah.
And that's how golf is to me. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. But I can respect what it means to people. The thing that I fear for the sport of golf, which has never had a 20-year run of relevance like it's had the last 20 years, right? My fear for golf would be this, and that is that people like me now are going to completely check out. I'm not saying there are a lot of me. I think I'm in the minority. But the people that are like, oh, I enjoy watching the Masters. I enjoy watching the PGA. And if it's a rainy Sunday and I'm flipping channels, yeah, I'll watch one of the FedEx Cup or, whatever it's called. I don't even know. But, like a non-major, so to speak. I think there are a lot of people like that, like me now, that are going to be like, yeah, I have no interest in it. This is run by like Saudi Arabia, and it's not.
Do you say that more from a moralistic standpoint?
A little bit. Now, you know what? I've never been one, Kevin, that has been overly involved or concerned with ownership groups, politics, etc.
Right.
But this just feels different. It feels greasy.
Yeah,
it feels gross.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It feels.
Yeah, I haven't showered in the Coke lot for 3 days. That's what it feels like.
I mean, it does, and it also, and this is what happened. And I hate making this analogy because I realize how obvious and lazy and whatever it sounds, but it feels a little bit like what happened in open wheel racing when it split was, and then it came back together. was by then people were just kind of like, yeah, I've moved on to something else, and it was too confusing to me. Now, this wasn't the case here because they weren't split long enough, right? But
although there is a lot of confusion.
Yeah, and so the confusion, I think, makes it – I have two choices here, okay? I have two choices. One is that I sit down and I painstakingly learn this new math, or the other is that I say, I don't need this new math, and I move on. I already did the former once. I'm not going to do it again. Like, I do think that there are people that are going to say, yeah, this all now to me, I can't. So who exactly is in charge and which golf, like how are they going to, how are tournaments going to be handled? And I'm going to go watch. I've really been enjoying college baseball lately, and that's going to be my new thing, or whatever it might be. I don't think ultimately that's going to be the long term. I think people will get over it, but I can't deny, Kevin, that it just feels gross.
Yeah, it does. And I don't want to act like, I'm sitting here carrying some moral flag 365 days, 24/7 around the clock, but I have some major issues on that side of it. I also have a ton of issues just from a competition standpoint. That's why I hated LIV probably more than anything. I thought it was a glorified exhibition series tour. I have always enjoyed the meritocracy element of the PGA Tour, and you earn what you get. You make a cut, and you earn more status. You don't, you're not going to get into the majors. What golf has an issue with, among other things, first off, Jake, this is a PGA Tour Saudi merger. So when they play the U.S. Open next week, Jake, that has no bearing on that. Golf is run by 5 different governing bodies, and that is an issue. None of the majors are affected by yesterday's news. The Masters, the U.S. Open, the British Open, and the PGA Championship, the 4 majors, are all run by separate governing bodies, which is confusing in itself. This is a PGA Tour, so think of all the other tournaments throughout the year. Think of the Players' Championship, and last week, Jack Nicklaus's tournament, those tournaments. So the confusion is there. I do think, and I don't know when we'll get there, because frankly, I think yesterday's news was lap 1 of 200 laps. We need to run the race to get clarity on what this means. To your point, Jake, who runs it? What's the schedule look like? Where are these events going to be played? All those things. I do think this is the first step in getting all parties on the same golf course. Like
understood.
Koepka, DJ, Patrick Reed, those guys now playing golf on a somewhat consistent basis with Rory, with Scotty Scheffler, with Jon Rahm. And for the golf fan, that probably is a good thing.
Well,
but again, I have no idea how we get from yesterday's extremely vague press release with not a lot of clarity to, oh yeah, these guys are going to play 16 tournaments a year, and they are going to have some team events with it. There's going to be some 54-hole events. There's going to be no cuts, this and that. It's just very confusing to it all.
Kevin, 2 things here. Andrew points this out. This will be water under the bridge in a month, and people will still watch golf. I don't disagree with that amongst the diehards. And there's a lot of diehards. So, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. But here is, okay, this is the best way that I can say it. And after I say it, Kevin, I want you to tell me, as a major golf enthusiast like you are, if you think I'm being extreme, okay? When the NFL, which is the 8,000-pound gorilla in this country from a sports standpoint, the only time that the NFL has really taken a PR hit and been at jeopardy of people indeed not watching it, what was the backbone reason for that? 5 years ago or so.
Players kneeling?
Correct. I don't want politics in my sports, right?
Yeah.
When the NBA started getting backlash from people on talk radio and letters to the editor and tweets and whatever else, what was the reason for that?
Yeah, more of a public stance on social issues.
Just shut up and dribble. Yeah. I don't want politics in my sports. I watch sports to get away from politics. I watch sports to get away from the real world. I don't want to hear about politics in my sports. That I don't care if that's what you think, but I don't need to know it. That this is the narrative, right? And now many of the people who follow golf, that the reason they followed it to a great extent was they are also the same group that didn't want politics in their sports. Now, there is no sport in the United States that has a greater immediate association to politics than professional golf.
The PGA Tour is sport washing. That's what they're doing for the Saudis.
Right.
They are continuing to cover up the issues that region has had for multiple decades. The 9/11 element to it, I think, is beyond damning. And again, it goes back to my Jay Monahan thoughts at the start of the definition of a hypocrite, absolutely soulless in what he did with 9/11 families over the past year, and then to turn his back on them like that in one of the more slimy manners I've ever seen. That is really hard for me to grasp. And there's part of me, Jake, that has to admit, do I just accept scandal? I watched the World Cup. I watched the Olympics. There's a lot of scandal in the IOC. There's a lot of scandal in FIFA. I think, again, the Saudis, to me, and their involvement in 9/11 takes it to another level. That's me personally. But it is slimy. That's where I'm at. I do think there is still a lot of confusion. I was texting last night with a member of the PGA Tour. He's actually a top 100 player in the world. And I go, from what you know right now, give me your thoughts. And he texted back this. Again, top 100 player in the world, been on the PGA Tour for several years. He said this: shocked more than anything. I can't really comment intelligently until we find out further details. Long term, I would think it has to be good for golf as a whole. I think there's a good chance something happened behind the scenes that we may never know about that really pushed this deal through, although it still has to be voted on by the board members. Sounds like LIV is over after 2024. Again, PGA Tour player, top 100 player in the world, sharing that with me last night. The board and the policy and, Yasir, and I butcher his last name every time, the governor of the Public Investment Fund, the one that is, in charge of all this money that they're bringing to the PGA Tour. He's now the chairman. Jay Monahan, PGA Tour commissioner, is now the CEO, and there's a policy board in place. So how does all of that play out? Over time, do we see the chairman, the Saudis, push people off that policy board that he doesn't want and wants his people on it? Does it become a Saudi majority, or does it stick to a PGA Tour majority like it is right now? I think that is a question that I have. And Jake, it might be premature.
But Kevin, what did you say at the beginning? What's undefeated?
It's money.
Yeah, there's your answer.
Right. So, yes, it will be eventually Saudis. That's kind of where I'm guessing. It might be premature for this, Jake. But what we saw yesterday was really the Saudis getting their first inroads into American sports. We've seen some stuff in the English Premier League with Newcastle United, one of the teams. We've seen some F1 involvement. Cristiano Ronaldo now plays for a Saudi soccer team. Yesterday was the first major inroads into whatever, the Western Hemisphere, however you want to describe it. Because basically the Saudis want to do this. They want to say, oh, wow, all those companies over there that partner with the PGA Tour, I want a seat at the table with them. That's what they're doing. Well, I want to introduce our economy to them. So that's what they've done with this deal yesterday, say, okay, you guys have this established brand with all these companies that we really love and we have no ties to. We'd like to get in on that. That was the goal yesterday, and they did that with all the money they have. Now the question for me also becomes this. Do we see some sort of Saudi ownership group, a.k.a. the Public Investment Fund, do we see them own a Major League Baseball team in the next 5 to 10 years? Do we see them try to buy an NBA team?
Yeah, and do those leagues
allow that?
Yeah.
Major League Baseball could use some revenue right now. You think the insert your joke about the Athletics, by the way, they scored, I think, 11 runs yesterday. You think some of those bottom feeder teams in Major League Baseball could use $40 billion from the Public Investment Fund? That, I think, is something you have to acknowledge. And will we ever get to a point? I don't think we will, because it's such a brotherhood in a fraternity, but to the earlier point, money is undefeated. Do we ever get to a point, maybe it's 20 years down the road, where you've got Saudi investment into multiple NFL teams? And how does that look? How does that all play out? Because what yesterday told me is the PGA Tour will have some events in that part of the world coming up very soon. And the goal is to wine and dine big-time American businesses and try to tap into our economy and partners. When does that start to sprinkle into one of the 4 big professional sports leagues here in the U.S.?
I'm simply going to say this, and I'll try to limit saying this to once an hour, because it's not a can of worms I want to get into, nor do people want us to. So long as we have people who are seen as leaders of this country who prioritize or determine success or morality based on how much money it brings in, then this is the path that this country will always be headed. I'll simply say it that way. So long as we have people who prioritize the bottom line, and it's always been about the bottom line to an extent, I get.
Right.
But we also had in this country a very defined limit on. We always in this country had a price tag on our scruples, and we had a price tag. Our values didn't have a price tag, I should say. We always had a very defined separation of the difference between, yes, it's great to make money. However, you have to have principle with it. That was always an American foundation. But that has gone away, and now that there is voice out there that says winning is defined by how much money you make, then this is the direction that a percentage of this country is going to be willing to take. And so it opens up a whole different Pandora's box.
Yeah, the morsels of morality evaporated yesterday. And maybe I was naive and living in a fairy tale world to think that still mattered. And I also kind of laugh at people who are like, well, I mean, boy, did LIV win yesterday. LIV wasn't working. The money funding it was working.
Correct. That's correct.
Like, LIV wasn't about golf. It wasn't about competition. It was about sport washing, and it was about trying to tap into our economy and our power brokers.
You know what it was, Kevin?
No one was watching. No one was caring. They weren't winning in court. Players were complaining about it over there. Numerous higher-ups within LIV was leaving, but they had endless pools of cash. LIV was the big college booster, Jake, that says the athletic department, you want the new weight room? Then my son is a walk-on.
Kevin.
That's what LIV was.
No, LIV was the Trojan horse. LIV was the Saudis' way of saying, we want to overtake a sports league in the United States, so we're going to go ahead and create this sham league that people think is going to be a competition. We know it ain't going to work. Mm-hmm. We know that this is not going to have longevity or legs to it. But what it's going to do is they're going to figure out, by us failing and not having a TV contract and still being around and giving out money that is to an obscene amount, we are going to send the message to the PGA, we're not going away. And we're going to force them to say, you know what, we're as long as we're losing people over there and they don't seem to care that they're throwing gaboons of money and taking our stars away, holy cow, they have unlimited capital, and so they're not going to go away. We need to take care of this. And so LIV was a creation by that group to be able to facilitate for them to take over the sport of golf. That's what it was.
Yeah. And I cannot stress this enough. Jay Monahan, an absolute soulless fraud, pleaded, begged for the likes of Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods and whoever else you want to throw into that group to get into the bunker with him, to stand up for the PGA Tour, do it in a very public stance, to call out LIV, to turn away millions. And I mean, we're talking $500 million Rory potentially turned down. Tiger, nearly $1 billion he turned down. And now all of a sudden, because the comma grew and another zero is added onto it, he goes behind their back. He does this in a very shady manner, announces it on CNBC, and potentially, Jake, we're going to have the likes of, again, Bryson DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka, who took the money, and we'll see what the ramifications are, but there's probably a good chance they come back to the PGA Tour without any sort of punishment.
Right. And a bunch of money. Right.
And a bunch of money. So, yeah, boy, what a day.
Think you ever see Tiger again? That's what I thought of.
Yeah, again, Mark, the majors being separate from the PGA Tour at Tiger's point of his career, we probably will see him in those settings, but it sounded like, based off the PGA Tour is playing in Canada this week. They had a players meeting yesterday afternoon. We'll play some audio coming up from that here in a little bit. But I saw a player tweet out there was a standing ovation in the room asking for Jay Monahan to be fired. Yeah, I think that tells you probably everything that you need to know with this. Now, how player run is this tour? They say it is. Clearly it wasn't with yesterday's meeting. Will Haskison joins at 8:30. Again, tons and tons of questions on that end. Stephen Holder at 8 o'clock. Jake, it is an open OTA for the Colts coming up here later today. Shane Steichen is scheduled to meet the media. I get that this investigation is ongoing, but Chris Bauer's got to be at that podium, right, and not Shane Steichen to talk about Isaiah Rodgers?
We're still gathering the facts. Right?
This is more of an organizational thing than Shane Steichen 2.5 months on the job. He probably had 2 conversations with Isaiah Rodgers in his life. Isaiah Rodgers did all these things reportedly under Chris Ballard's watch, not
I think
Shane
a very
Steichen's watch.
I'm not saying it's their fault, but I think a thing that's going to be hard for fans to grasp, that's a kind of damning concept for the Colts. I mean, a blip. It's not like some huge thing, but is the fact that it appears as though Isaiah Rodgers was well aware of this investigation for weeks, if not months, before the Colts even found out about it. And it also appears as though the Colts found out about this like the same time you and I did.
Is the only reason we haven't seen Rodgers cut yet simply like legality with the NFLPA?
I would assume. I mean, he hasn't been cited or charged publicly. Right. Charged is the wrong word, but in the court of the NFL law, he has not been. He outed himself, but he hasn't been outed. Yeah, the league has not issued anything on that end. So I'll be out there later today. We can chat about that. And as we snuck in there amidst a lot of LIV and Saudi golf combo, the Pacers have 2 solo workouts today. It just happens to be the 2 prospects that I am probably the biggest fans of for the Pacers at number 7. So we saw last week with Cam Whitmore. Your campaign last year worked with Benedict Mathurin. Yeah, these are. I'm not quite on the Benedict Mathurin train with either of them, but if I'm getting on a train with anybody here, these would be the 2 guys. And again, 2 solo workouts coming up later today. We'll explain who those prospects are. Cam Whitmore from Villanova was last week. When the Pacers have the solo workouts, that means these guys feel like they are top 10 picks. How was your mom's 80th? Do you FaceTime her from Hilton Head? She sent me a text late, and then apparently the condo where the entire family was staying, there was some wiring issue, and the fire department showed up in the middle of my mom's party, and I made a joke that maybe it was because of 80 candles, and then that was like the extent of it. This is weird. Now, you tell me if I should read into this. My mom's birthday yesterday. Every year, my family, meaning my parents, my 2 sisters, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, my niece, nephew, whatever, they all go to Hilton Head. It's a week-long trip that's like this big tradition, and they always seem to plan it around weeks where I have races. Now, like 3 months ago when I asked, what week is Hilton Head this year? They said, oh, we're leaving the Friday before the Indy 500 and then staying through until like the next Saturday. Would you be able to come? And I said, well, probably not. That's a fairly busy weekend for me, and then I have the Detroit race. And that's where we stood. For every time I asked, they kept saying, we're leaving the Friday before the Indy 500. And then, all of a sudden, the Indy 500 rolls around, and everybody looks like they're here, and I find out it actually is this week that they went. So I think maybe this was all a smokescreen to keep me here while they all went and played in Hilton Head. Should I be reading into this?
Well, I can't say I disagree with some of their thought process.
You did just remember it was your mom's birthday
on that end.
that day.
No.
Yeah.
I know my mom's birthday is June 6th. Matter of fact.
That was some awkward audio yesterday.
No, let me tell you this. Let me tell you that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Several years ago, I stopped by my parents' house. I have a key to the house, obviously. They were gone. I walk in, the alarm is going off, so I have to go over and hit the code to turn off the alarm, to let the police and the fire department know, yes, I am legitimately here. My dad had told me, your mother's birthday is the code. I shouldn't even be saying this now to people, I guess.
Wow.
Boy,
Jeez, man.
You want to reveal the address too while you're at it?
It's your social security number.
So I go in and I punch it in, and nothing happens. Now all of a sudden the police show up, the fire department shows up, everything. I said, Dad, what the hell? You told me it was Mom's birthday. And he goes, well, it is June 3rd. I said, Dad, Mom's birthday's not June 3rd.
Oh, boy.
So, come on now. Cut me some slack. But I knew my mom's birthday was June 6th. I did not realize yesterday was the 6th. Does that make sense?
I don't know if I can fully endorse your take on that end of it. He is Jake Quarry. I'm Kevin Bowen. Mark Dykton, as always. Guys, a little overcast, right?
Raining this morning when I got in.
It's supposed to be beautiful by noon, 77, not a cloud in the sky by 1 p.m.
Quite the debut last night in Cincinnati. The Reds continue to play. Well, I guess they weren't great over the weekend, but they're certainly better than the Cubs. Hell of an atmosphere last night for the Reds. They win in a walk-off, and again, a big-time debut for them. Fever Leah Boston continues to be very good at basketball. They lose a close one. And tonight, Game 3 of the NBA Finals, Denver. 2.5-point favorite.
Just did our whole morning check down, Mark.
Begins here.
What are you even doing next time?
For people that go into work at 7:28, make sure we kind of cover our bases there.
All right, fair enough.
Stephen Holder, 8 o'clock. Will Haskett, 8:30. Kevin Aquari on a Wednesday.
Gardens.com. The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
How about those red legs, Kevin?
Let's go.
Don't look down, but here come the Red Legs.
Mark, about time you played that. 3 runs in the 9th, walk-off over the Dodgers, but honestly, Elly De La Cruz, the Major League Baseball debut for the number 1 prospect in MLB, certainly brought an atmosphere pretty unseen in Cincinnati, especially as of late. Batted cleanup last night, played third base, hardest hit ball of the Reds season, a double to the fence. Had a couple walks, sparked some things, certainly brought some energy, some life to the Reds franchise.
Who would you say was the last Reds player to have this kind of buzz? There are 2 that come to mind for me.
Well, I mean, not organically through the organization, but certainly when Griffey arrived.
Let's see, Jay Bruce.
I'll go with 2 since then.
Ooh, since Griffey?
I'm not saying that had this kind of long term, but I'm saying like in the immediacy of their arrival was like, whoa.
Aroldis Chapman.
Aroldis Chapman's one of them for sure.
This might be totally off, but just like the sheer speed of Billy Hamilton.
That's up there, but again,
I don't think anyone's in De La Cruz's category.
No, I get in terms of the long-term expectation. In terms of like an immediate buzz of like, wow, look at this young player, that this is fun to watch. Aquino was that way for like 2 weeks because he got out to this amazing start. But Aroldis Chapman is the one that there was a lot of hype about Aroldis Chapman, and he backed it up. I mean, when he threw a 105-mile-an-hour pitch and everything else, I mean, there was a lot of buzz about him.
Yeah, Chapman, I would say. De La Cruz, though, is just a pure position player hitter. I think it's just a different world. So far, fun atmosphere last night, much needed for the Reds. Kind of a wild game. Big comeback for them as they beat the Dodgers in a walk-off. Cubs lose the Angels 7-4. How about the Athletics? Ending a 15-game road losing streak.
They are, by the way.
Did they 10-run rule the Pirates?
Do you want to guess their record?
Was the 13th win last night?
They're 13-50.
Can we get an update on the Royals, by the way?
They have 50 losses.
Well, what's the Royals record?
The Kansas City Royals, thank you for asking, currently 18-43.
Okay. So we're knocking on that door.
5.5 game lead over the Athletics.
Mark, were you Victory Field bound last night by
No,
chance to
no,
see
I was
the
not.
AAA debut for Henry Davis, the number 1 overall pick from a couple years ago?
I would love to watch him, though.
4-2, Indians lose. 135 first pitch for those looking to see Davis in action and the Indians today over at Victory Field.
Jake, watch out. There's a Diamondback right on your heels.
Oh, I can hear it.
That would be reason to watch out.
1 game back of your little Baltimore Orioles. Diamondbacks would probably eat some Orioles for a snack.
Do Orioles have heels?
I don't know. They have those probably like little legs,
I don't think
straw legs.
Like they don't have like Achilles, right?
No.
God, but that's the thing. Here's the thing. The Diamondbacks, I mean, you're rooting for a snake, okay? Your team, Jay Moynihan, right?
Yeah, Monahan, yeah.
Monahan, sorry. I'm rooting for cute
Fraud.
fella.
Soulless Monahan.
The Baltimore, just look at the cute fella on the hat. Hey, root for me. That's all he's saying. And you, on the other hand, going with a snake.
Yeah.
I think it says a lot.
What's your golf comp for your Orioles, then?
Trying to call the Diamondbacks the Saudis here?
Yeah. What's the golf comp for the Orioles? Rory McIlroy.
McIlroy,
What happened?
yeah.
What happened here? That's a horrible accent.
It's Rory McIlroy. That's right.
At all.
Tonight, Game 3 in Miami. It'll be the Nuggets and the Heat.
Chevy Ballesteros.
1-1. Denver favored in that by 2.5.
Peaked
You guys
in 1980.
surprised at all the Nuggets are favored? Maybe closer to pick 'em?
No, because the Nuggets individually are the more athletic and better team. But collectively, Miami's, I'm telling you. Winner tonight, I always say this, you ready? Winner tonight wins the series.
Yeah, when it's ever the odd games in a series, I feel like typically that statement can probably be said, especially when you get into Game 3, Game 5, obviously Game 7. But I do feel like it has that feel to it. This game is just, huge for how the rest of the series will go. Game 4 is coming up on Friday. Game 5, which we know we'll have at least that, will be Monday in Denver.
When does the NHL continue? When do they resume?
Thursday, right?
Yeah.
This is where we get the 4 straight days down in Miami.
The Florida Panthers hit the snooze button twice. So now's when they wake up, right?
Well, they're fighting. They're not really scoring a whole lot or stopping Vegas from scoring on that end. Speaking of scoring, a lot of scoring last night in the Indiana Fevers game against Chicago. They had a chance for a road victory there. Leah Boston with a rebound putback. I think it was like 2 or 3 seconds left, but Chicago scored on the other end to force it into overtime. 108-103, the Fever lose that one. Leah Boston, though, 25-11.
3 straight losses by a total of 10 points.
Yeah, it seems like they've had great chances late. It's safe to say Leah Boston has lived up to the number 1 overall pick hype.
What they've got to do now is figure out ways to, honestly, like effectively entry pass her the ball, to be honest with you. But
I still laugh at Leah Boston doing our lowly show and Good Morning America in the same morning.
We were the appetizer.
yeah, came here for. What are you wearing, by the way, Mark? Is that a Hawaiian
Bucky's
shirt?
Huh? It's a Bucky's baseball shirt. Bucky's Beavers. And he's got a baseball.
How many Bucky's?
2.
He's rocked
shirts.
that before.
Yeah.
You only have 2 Bucky's shirts?
No. Well, no, I have 3.
Every time I pay attention. You know, yesterday, a peek behind the curtain here of just how awake and aware I am on this program. Yesterday, we had a meeting at like 11:30, and I said, oh, look, Kevin went home and changed. And he said, I've been wearing this since 6 a.m. Oh, okay. I didn't pay attention.
I was like, that's quite humbling.
So I didn't necessarily pay attention to your outfit on most days, Mark, but it seems as though when I do notice you're wearing Bucky stuff.
It's because the cute fella that's on the shirt catches your eye.
He is a cute fella. Now, would you wear if I bought for you, and I don't know when I'm going to be near, but although, you know what, the family, when they're coming back from their covert operation trip to Hilton Head without me, when they come back up through, they stop at Bucky's. Mm-hmm. If I had them buy one of the full Bucky's pajamas with the footies, would you wear them?
All in.
You've seen them, right?
Oh, I've seen them.
Have you contemplated?
The girls would love that, Mark.
Same with the swimsuit. My wife said, don't even think about
Excuse me?
The swimsuit. The Bucky Beaver swimsuit.
Can you imagine?
There's men's
Is
and
it
women's.
a Speedo?
If there was,
Maybe that was a Speedo I was supposed to wear if Tiger would have won the Masters.
No, I'll be going through Bucky's later this
So did
week.
Tiger Woods find out about this on Twitter yesterday, like all of us?
Seems like everybody did. Colin Morikawa. A bunch of guys were tweeting that they were like just finding out the news.
We'll talk a lot about this LIV Golf thing, Saudi Golf League, and the PGA Tour, what it means not only for golf, but potentially for other professional sports leagues. Again, a huge day over at the Pacers facility, 2 weeks and 1 day out from the NBA draft. 2 solo workouts, 2 guys that I am big fans of. And more on the Colts. I'll be up at the Colts complex later today as we hear from Shane Steichen for the first time since the Isaiah Rodgers reported violation. We'll hear from Chris Ballard today. Stephen Holder going to join us at 8. Kevin Aquaria on an overcast Wednesday here in Indy.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Boy, ain't that the truth? Everybody does have a price. Well played by Mark Dykton there. So we mentioned to lead off the show. Money doesn't talk. Money doesn't win. Money is absolutely undefeated, and we saw that yesterday in the merger of the PGA Tour. Merger is such a funny word. I don't... The press release was incredibly vague yesterday, Jake, from the Saudis and the PGA Tour. There's so many questions I have about how much money did Jay Monahan get paid or is getting paid to be the new CEO. Is this simply just, hey, here's our funds, get us a seat at the table with all of your great companies in the United States. That's all we want, and we'll let you guys run it how you choose. Do you see more of a live aspect on the PGA Tour? Do we see 54-hole events? Do we see no cuts? Do we see music being played? Do we see shotgun starts? Do we see team events? Is it going to be more of a global tour? I am actually not opposed to that. I enjoy that about golf and that you're able to play around the world. I'm curious about that, but tons and tons of questions, and we'll ask a lot of those to Will Haskett coming up at 8:30.
There are two things that are possible here, Kevin. Scenario one would be that Saudi Arabian investors, government, whatever it might be, said, you know what? We like golf. Golf's become a big-time leisure sport around the world, and we'd like to expand the world of golf to a more international audience. So we're going to start our own golf league. And we have unlimited capital, so we're going to pluck away some of the biggest stars to help get it running. And then after like a year or however long it's been, they said, gosh, you know what? This didn't have near the footing that we thought. But we have unlimited money, so we're just going to have to get a monopoly and buy out the competition. That's scenario one. Scenario two is that the Saudis said, you know what? We like golf. Golf's become really popular around the world, and quite frankly, we don't like the fact that the PGA runs things and is based in the U.S. and has a bunch of U.S. stars, and that they – so we're just going to go ahead and create like a shell league that we have no interest really in developing. But we have unlimited capital, so we can just keep it afloat until basically we make it clear that we're not going away, and the PGA then caves, and we're just going to buy the whole damn thing.
Yep. Scenario two. They don't like golf, Jake. They like the money associated with
Correct.
golf.
And
it wasn't about growing the game. It was about how do we grow our economy in different parts of the world, and how do we get next to – Jake, you're the CEO of, let's go with Workday. That was the sponsor of last week's tournament. Okay? And I'm Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour commissioner. Mark is Yasser, the governor of the Public Investment Fund. With yesterday's deal, Yasser says, all right, Jay Monahan, me, take me to the Workday event and introduce me to the CEO. That's what yesterday was. That partnership is now formulated 52 weeks out of the year, or however many weeks these PGA Tour events will be, and the Saudis can wine and dine American businesses either on their own soil with tournaments that I think inevitably will happen over there, or they just show up to these PGA Tour events. That's what yesterday was all about. Not about growing the game, BS. Not about their love for golf, this and that. No. They want to get in the pockets of the golf world because they have strong partnerships with elite companies in the United States. That's all yesterday was about. And all the last really 12 months was about.
I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. I said I was only going to say it once an hour, but this is twice an hour. I've done sports talk radio for a number of years now. When you do that, you get market research, and you have bosses that tell you, like we've talked to the audience, that they like A, B, and C, etc. When Colin Kaepernick brought social awareness and politics into the NFL, people that were opposed to Colin Kaepernick's politics masked their displeasure of his politics by saying they just don't want politics in sports, period. It's not that I disagree with him. I just don't want that in my sports. I watch sports to get away from that crap. And when we would talk about it on the radio, the immediate reaction from people, probably rightly so, was, look, I turn on the radio to get away from this stuff. Keep it out of my sports. That's the last area of, like, purity to me is my sports. I don't want to have to deal with and listen to political crap. And that's totally understandable and totally fair. And the NFL, which is the 8,000-pound gorilla, had about a 2-year stretch where it was the 7,998-pound gorilla because people got tired of the politics. And rating, I don't know if you would say ratings truly did dip, but there were people that felt like they were exhibiting a power by boycotting the NFL for like 3 weeks, even though they strangely were tweeting about it all the time. But I digress. The NBA as well, when, shut up and dribble. When LeBron James and other players became political and started talking about politics, people got turned off by the NBA. This now, for the first time, is taking the governing body of a sports league and making it 1,000% political. Because the government that is largely connected to the most horrific terrorist attack on the soil of this country is now being welcomed into running one of our most beloved sports leagues. And people seemingly are okay with that because in the end, to your point, Kevin, we are seeing before our very eyes what we've always known, and that is to a large percentage of people, if not all, when it really comes down to it, victory and morality is defined by how much money it brings in.
One more comma, one more zero. Okay, we can talk now. 9/11 Families United released this statement yesterday. And for those unfamiliar with how the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan, their commissioner specifically, was handling things over the last 12 months, he played up the 9/11 card a whole lot. Very vocal about that. It was probably one of the bigger debates between players going to the LIV Golf Tour. You had 9/11, families outside of some of the LIV events here in the United States. And then seemingly all of that has gone away in Jay Monahan's eyes here in the last 24 hours. This statement yesterday from the 9/11 Families United, I quote, PGA Commissioner Jay Monahan co-opted the 9/11 community last year in the PGA's unequivocal agreement that the Saudi LIV project was nothing more than sports washing of Saudi Arabia's reputation. But now the PGA and Monahan appear to have become just more paid Saudi shills, taking billions of dollars to cleanse the Saudi reputation so that Americans in the world will forget how the kingdom spent their billions of dollars before 9/11 to fund terrorism, spread their virtualistic hatred of Americans, and finance Al-Qaeda and the murder of our loved ones. Make no mistake, we will never forget. End quote.
Again,
hard to disagree. Rubs me the wrong way. I'll sit there and I will probably, eventually watch golf. I'm not going to act like I'm some, moralistic, 365, 24/7, and oh my gosh, I'm high and mighty and there's no chance. I don't love it.
I mean,
when does it start to infiltrate more? Other professional sports leagues.
That's a good question. I mean, does the NFL start to, what if I have no idea. I mean, what if
I think we're a ways away from the NFL, Jake, because I think that current ownership group still has enough historical significance in that league where, a guy like Jim Irsay feels like he's such a steward. I cannot see him deviating from what that general ownership group looks like and acts like, and they want to maintain that for as long as possible. But if you get into Major League Baseball, or you get into, Major League Baseball is probably the one that I keep on coming back to, where revenue's a little bit more scarce, and I say scarce is a very loose term when you compare it to other professional sports leagues. That's where I think we could see something happen. and I don't know how it works. I know in the NFL, to approve a new ownership group, you've got to have 75% of the owners vote that new owner in. I don't know if that's the same for all professional sports, but I think yesterday's news, Jake, was, I would say all of us in our lives have thought about doing something and been a little hesitant about doing it. Oh, boy, I don't want to be the first one. Oh, that just looks a little bad. That looks a little awkward. But then somebody else does it, and now you sit there and you sit back and say, oh, wow, they did it. They're receiving all the backlash. If I am the second person to do it, I'll receive backlash, but I won't receive as much as they did. Instead of being a front page story for a week, I'll just be a front page story for 2 days. Can I withstand that? Think about all the second chances you give professional athletes. Deshaun Watson. It's worth it. I'll take a little bit of the backlash. I might not be the first one that jumps into it, but now that we've seen the PGA Tour get in bed with them, if I'm the second or the third, it might not be as frontline story like it is right now.
Kevin, I'm not saying it hasn't always been the case, but we live in a world today where attention, admiration, ratings, and money have completely, in the undercurrent of this country, superseded principle. And it's probably true that that's always been the case. But due to the multimedia avenues of 2023, it now was totally on display for the world to see. And an area of the world with an unlimited checkbook decided to cash in on it. That's just my opinion.
We'll get to Stephen Holder here in just a second. I did want to mention this before break. Mark, are you familiar with the French soccer player, and I hope I'm saying this right, N'Golo Kanté?
Yes.
Top, 10 player in the world?
Yeah.
Maybe even higher than that, top 5. I don't know if he's in the top 5, but one of the best soccer players in the world. Being reported that there's a meeting ongoing in London for him to sign a contract with a Saudi Arabian soccer team for $100 million per season. Like, these are some of the things we're starting to see. Cristiano Ronaldo, already there. Again, a player in his prime, one of the top 5, top 10 players in the world for soccer, going there, going away from the EPL, going away from the version of the NFL for soccer. It's individualized sports right now. It's golf, it's a little bit of F1, and, I guess soccer necessarily isn't individualized, but certainly these brands are. In his case, when do we start to see the wildfire spread to more team sports, more American professional sports leagues? I do think that is a relevant question with yesterday's news. Speaking of news, Isaiah Rodgers, that situation, Stephen Holder was all over it. He's going to join us on the other side. Kevin Aquari here on a Wednesday.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Quite the newsy Wednesday here in the first full week of June. Again, a big workout coming up later today for the Pacers. We'll touch on that a little bit more on the LIV Saudi Golf front at 8:30 with Will Haskett. But the other big news item that we focused a lot of yesterday's show on was Isaiah Rodgers and the NFL investigating him for a violation of the league's gambling policy. Stephen Holder was all over it, and he joins us now from ESPN.com. Stephen, today we are scheduled to hear from Shane Steichen. It is an open OTA session. We get one of these a week. It just happened to fall on this Wednesday, so really the first time that important people in the Colts organization will publicly speak about this. What details do you think we'll get, / do you think Chris Ballard will take the podium, given the fact that this theoretically happened under his watch and Isaiah Rodgers is a draft pick and Shane Steichen has known him for 2 months?
Right. So, yeah, I do think that Shane Steichen will at least have to address the matter, at least in a roundabout way. Whether he takes it head on, I don't know. They can kind of fall back on a truth, which is that the investigation is ongoing. So that's kind of the one part of it where they have a little bit of an out. On the other hand, Isaiah Rodgers has kind of owned this, with his statement. And, it's not a guilty plea, but it is a guilty plea. It just doesn't specify what he's guilty of.
He didn't deny anything in that statement.
Exactly. So it's basically a guilty plea, we can get into the weeds about, well, did you do this versus that? But he violated the policy it appears he violated the policy, and that is what we were told at ESPN.com as well. So, including betting on his own team. So anyway, to your question, I think Shane Steichen, he can't get up there. I don't think he can get up there and say, we're not going to talk about that. We're just here to talk about football. I mean, he could. I just think that would be a bad look. I think he has to get up there and he has to at least talk about how they are handling this topic generally. They have lots of other players on the roster, and this is hopefully not the first time they've had to talk about gambling. I hope they have talked about this at length. So I think that's the area where he needs to be up front and talk about how they handle this topic with their players and what kinds of messages they give them. I know that they talk about it, and I know that they should know the rules. So I think that's what he needs to impress upon people when he talks today.
Stephen, do you believe that, I guess a two-part question here, I would assume that the Colts have concern that this is not an isolated incident, and that's not to say that there's any evidence that it is not. Right. You know what I mean? But just naturally you would. So to what level do you think they are now trying to explore that to make sure that they don't get kind of blindsided again, which I think they were in this case? And then secondly, do you believe it is an isolated incident in terms of player?
Well, first off, they certainly were blindsided. That is true. And in fact, when this was unfolding on Monday, I was talking to someone in the organization, a very high-ranking person who you'd know, and they were getting information from me, which I thought was just amazing, because the NFL just never provided them with any information about this. They did not know the investigation was ongoing. They had not been briefed on it. The leak came from, we believe, it appears, the leak initially came from the gaming industry sources, or someone in that realm, and not from the NFL side. So yeah, they were certainly blindsided by it, and that's a terrible place to be as an organization, right? When you have a huge story. I mean, they had the top story in the NFL for at least that day, and had no knowledge that it was coming. It wasn't like some contract extension they'd been working on, and the news got out. No, they had no control over this and no knowledge of it. So that's a terrible feeling. If you're the Colts, I think you are moving heaven and earth right now to talk to your players and communicate with your players, plead with your players. Look, please learn from this, and please make sure you're not the next guy. Now, I think that probably needs to be true in every NFL facility right now. one of the things JMV and I talked about this yesterday, and as I was talking through it, it kind of registered with me. I just think the access to online betting is just so easy. The mobile betting is so easy. The access is so easy and so casual that it doesn't feel like a big deal, to a young man, I would imagine, right? And some of these guys are kids. Isaiah Rodgers this is his fourth year in the NFL. He's not a little kid, but I'm just saying, you are dealing with very young men in a lot of cases, and it can feel very casual and not a big deal. I don't care. Like, personally, this is not a moral thing. I don't give a damn. You can bet as much as you want. I don't have any opposition to that morally. I'm just talking about it from a football perspective. You can almost understand why it doesn't feel like a big deal. I'm just betting $50. It's in my friend's name. What's the big deal? But they have protocols, they have mechanisms set up to catch you, because the NFL, they cannot risk it. They are not going to put the integrity of the game at risk. And they don't care who you are. You are not bigger than the game in the end. And so they're not going to risk it. And these teams at this point, I think if you're a coach, I don't know if you can do this, but I'm thinking about all kinds of things, as if maybe you just tell your players, hey, listen, delete the apps, get the hell off of those things. We don't want to deal with it. It's not worth it. I don't know how the union would feel about that,
right? But Stephen,
I'd say.
The irony to me is the fact that the NFL wants to uphold the integrity of the game, but in reality, isn't the NFL actually making sure that they are upholding the integrity of the wagers of their consumer base?
Well, fair. That's fair. Yeah. Look, integrity of the game is not completely unrelated. No, it is a factor there, yes, because the last thing you want is to ever, give the question or raise the question that someone may do something to impact the outcome of a game. That has not been even remotely suggested here. I'm just saying they're trying not to go down that slippery slope, right? I understand that.
Stephen Holder,
I know you do too.
Sorry about that, Stephen. Stephen Holder's with us from ESPN.com. Stephen, the fact that it's Isaiah Rodgers stands out to me for these reasons. If you and I have this conversation, which we have a lot of conversations regarding the Colts, but if we were to sit here and be like, most important season for a player coming up in 2023, and you were going to make a list of Colts, in my opinion, you would have put Rodgers very high on that list. And again, there's several reasons why. First off, he's a 6th-round pick that made it to the end of his rookie contract, and I should still speak in present tense, has made it to it, and he's due more than $2 million this year. That's a big payday and a big increase from what he was making. It's a contract year, obviously. He plays a position where there's very little answers, short-term and long-term. When he's gotten playing time, he has shown some promise. I don't want to act like it's decimating to the Colts season, but man, you talk about a dude that just risked millions of his future and a golden opportunity for $25 and $50 bets. Boy, the level of stupidity is hard to ignore.
I don't get it, man. It's so disappointing. It's not about being preachy here.
Yeah, this is not a practice squad guy is what I'm getting at. This is not the 13th man. This is not a backup punter on the practice squad.
It's disappointing on 100 levels. Because of all the ones you outlined. I do think you make a great point. From a personal perspective, we saw Isaiah Rodgers show up, and how many 6th-round picks have gotten picked in your time covering this team, Kevin, right? I don't even know what the number is, and I can't even name all of them, okay, because they never stick around. They never make it.
Right.
Very rarely, okay? And here, as you said, here's a guy who did make it to the end of that contract, plays out the whole contract, or is about to at least, and has a golden opportunity. They trade Stephon Gilmore. You're probably his replacement, and you have this wonderful opportunity. do you know what a sort of middling starting veteran quarterback makes in the NFL? You can make, $4, $5, $6 million a year and not be like that good. You can just be starting level and make that kind of money. And all of it's in jeopardy now for Isaiah Rodgers. And then there is the impact to the team. one of the questions that had been asked quite a bit last year was why wasn't Isaiah Rodgers playing in many instances? And there were many times when we thought that maybe he should have been out there over someone else who shall not be named. and that was because people saw his talent and his potential. And maybe the team was starting to agree with that because they were going to put him out there. And this opportunity was going to be his. And he was going to have an opportunity to really make his case as a free agent next year to the Colts and to 31 other teams. And now, I don't know. I mean, we have to assume the worst at this point.
You know what, Steven? I totally get it. I'm not here to exonerate Isaiah Rodgers or to apologize for him, but I totally get it. When I was, and I know that it's easy for people to say, like, well, what an idiot he was. I'm not saying you guys, but, just the narrative in general. This guy had millions and he wasted it on $50. I totally get it, and I'll tell you why. I was a train wreck until I was like 29 years old. Yeah, I wasn't going out and doing a bunch of drugs. I wasn't going out and getting involved in criminal activity, but I had no comprehension or grasp of how my actions, what they meant long term. And I can only imagine what it would be like. I have no idea Isaiah Rodgers' background, but I have no idea what it would be like at 23, 24 years old to suddenly make huge money and seemingly have that all right there, where now all of a sudden the rules don't necessarily apply. They can tell you the rules apply to you. They can tell you all you want. I knew when I was 17 years old that I grew up in an environment with loving parents that things that would sink a lot of people probably didn't sink me. So I half listened to the rules. I was aware of the rules. I didn't grasp the rules. And for players in today's NFL, Steven, I'll be honest with you, you can't swing a dead cat in an NFL stadium and not see an ad for any of 5 different gambling apps. You can't go on the website of one without seeing it. You can't watch a game without seeing 100 different commercials. And if you are a player, I can totally see why the desensitized legality nature of the sports gambling that is ubiquitous around you would suddenly creep into your conscience of just simply feeling like that means the penalty and the ramification of it doesn't apply to you. And for me to sit here and act like I wouldn't have done the exact same thing when I was that age or fallen victim to it is totally, in my opinion, naive of who I was. Now, that's just me, but I can totally see why it happens.
Yeah, but Jake, did you have $2.5 million sitting there in year 4 and the chance to make generational
If I had
wealth
$2.5 million sitting there in year 4, Kevin, it would further cement to me the fact that I'm bulletproof.
Would you risk it, though, for $25 and $50 bets?
I wouldn't have had the wherewithal or the mature. I'm being honest about me now, and I'm an anomaly, I realize, but I was not mature enough to think about, Kevin, the long-term impact of it. Yes, to answer your question, yes, I would have, because I was too immature. What's that, Steven?
So that equation that Kevin laid out there, that wasn't something that would register with you. I get what you're saying. And I would say, look, I mean, I'll cop to it, right? I mean, I was young once. It was a long time ago. But, I'm a 22-year-old kid in South Florida, hanging out on South Beach on Friday night. Should I have taken a cab home a few times? Yeah, probably, But did I think about what was at stake? No, not really, because I was an idiot. And so there is that aspect, and I'm not speaking for Isaiah Rodgers. I'm just speaking for, generally how these things happen. I do understand that. I do think, though, on the devil's advocate side is, I think when you are in the NFL, and whether it's Isaiah Rodgers or anyone else, when you are in the NFL, I do think there's a little bit of a sobering up, if you will, to continue the metaphor, I guess, where you start to understand the stakes, and that you are held to a different standard, all of those things, whether it be gambling or anything else, right? You tend to understand that a little bit better because you now live a different life and you have a different set of circumstances than most people your age. So I like to think that that's true, but I also agree that they are inundated. We are all inundated with sports betting everywhere you look, everywhere you online, on TV, everywhere. And as I said earlier, I really think one of the big things is the accessibility to it. It's just so easy. It's so easy. I mean, I was watching the Kentucky Derby a few weeks back. I couldn't name a horse in this thing, okay? And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I downloaded an app, and I'm going to place a bet, right? You know, and it's like, I think I lost $40. I don't know. My kids aren't going to miss a meal, right? It's not a big deal. But that was so easy, maybe too easy. I don't know, you know? So I think that's part of it. It's just so accessible.
Stephen, last one for me. And again, Stephen Holder, ESPN.com, with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. But I guess before I get to my question, could you lay out again from a timeline standpoint, you believe the Colts did not know about this, and I should say Colts/NFL did not know about this until earlier this week, but Isaiah Rodgers knew about it dating back several months?
Well, no, the NFL did know because they have been, from our information, have been conducting the investigation.
So why don't they tell the Colts?
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I think this is kind of typical, I guess, of how this works, where they go through the process, and then when they have their findings, I guess they report it to the team. That's my understanding of it. So I was told that that's not that unusual. The reason these things get out, though, is the NFL has to employ other agencies and entities to kind of get to the bottom of it. The NFL doesn't have access to bank accounts or betting accounts, et cetera. So they have to employ third parties to kind of help them get the evidence and track it down. So that's how this all comes together. But no, the Colts, that is correct. To answer your question, they were not aware until Monday, is my understanding.
Okay, and then we're going to have Dave Burkett on tomorrow. I know he's a colleague of yours, covers the Lions, and the Lions have been a handful of guys have gotten in trouble for gambling. So I kind of want to get Dave's perspective on how that came to fruition, and just, they've had guys that were suspended different lengths, et cetera. One of the questions I want to ask Dave, and I'll throw it your way, and I don't know if you know this, so I'm not expecting you to know. Do we know exactly kind of how Isaiah got caught? Like, is this a geolocation thing affiliated with the team complex? And if you do it at the team complex, boom, it, sparks something with these betting apps, and they contact the third parties, to your point. I guess I'm just more curious from an FBI sense or a CIA sense, how he got caught.
Yeah, there is a little bit of a, CSI angle to this, and I don't know that answer. But you actually raise one possibility. If he did do it from the team facility, that would set off alarms, because that's something that they look for. That is explicitly prohibited, and that is, I believe, 2 or 3 of the players caught up in the last wave were popped because they bet on other sports from the team facility, and that is a no-no. Now, they got lesser suspensions than players who bet on actual NFL games, because the violation was not considered to be at the same level. It's still a violation, though. I believe they got 6 games, those guys. So that's still a pretty significant suspension. Here, the allegation is that we believe he bet on NFL games and perhaps Colts games, which is basically the absolute worst offense. So it won't be good if that's established. If the NFL can establish that, and that's the key, if the NFL can establish that, it's not going to be good for Isaiah Rodgers. But no, I do not know specifically how he got caught. But I think what we can say is that the NFL has processes in place that really, really are reliable, apparently, because they can catch guys who are doing these things in not an obvious way, apparently.
Stephen, in your opinion, in the grand scheme, on a scale of Dominic Rhodes whizzing himself in a cop car to the Pacers brawl, this will stick to the image of the franchise how much, or for how long?
Oh, I don't think it necessarily tarnishes the franchise. I think it's more a matter of they've had an interesting past year. So, I had a colleague text me something along those lines. Like, man, it's always something out of left field with your team. And I was like, that's a fair point. And really that hasn't been true for years and years, but it's been true recently, I guess, and that was clearly a reference to last season, lots of crazy things happening. So I don't think it sticks to the franchise necessarily. I do think that this is an individual decision, not anything organizational. So I don't worry about that part so much, particularly because Isaiah Rodgers while he's an important player for the Colts, he's not a household name. So I think that is, the reason. Now, if it were more like a Detroit situation where they had 5 players caught up, then you become synonymous with this kind of story. That I don't think is the case here.
See, I'll tell you what, in my opinion, just my opinion, but here's what I can see in the Jake Query crystal ball here, okay? I'm going to merge both of our big stories this morning into one. The Saudi Arabian money in golf a year and a half ago was inconceivable and grotesque and mortifying to virtually everyone. And now that they have gotten their hands firmly on golf, the answer from a lot of people is, yeah, but it's everywhere. I mean, just accept it. I mean, the Saudi money, it's not a big deal. They're involved in everything. It's just how it is, right? Right now, we are mortified at the thought of a guy using a sports gambling app in the NFL and getting suspended for it. And I have a feeling in a year, we're going to say, yeah, it's kind of everywhere, though. I mean, give the guy a break, slap him on the wrist, but it's everywhere.
It's not a terrible prediction.
Our barometer changes, man.
Yeah, it's not a terrible prediction. I actually feel like it could go either way. I actually think, and when I say that, what I mean is, I think the NFL could either go that direction and say, okay, look, guys, do whatever you want, just do not bet on your games. Which, whatever, I don't know how they prevent that, but whatever. Or they could go the other way and say, all right, guys, listen, you guys are not getting the hint here. We're shutting it down. Like, you guys ain't betting at all. Now, I don't know, how that from a union standpoint or legally, I don't know, workplace rules. I don't know how they can enforce that or if that's even enforceable. But that's possible too. I think everything's on the table. I don't know where this is going to go and which way, but I think it could be either one because this is certainly more prevalent than they ever want to admit. So it'll be interesting though. But you make a good point.
I think you mess with the integrity of the game, and that is something that owners in the league takes really, really serious.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but what I'm saying is...
They looked into deflated footballs seemingly
Kevin,
for a decade.
I totally agree, but what I'm saying is our distance of what we feel comfortable with to consider it in tampering with the integrity of the game, that goal line keeps moving, right?
Well, here's the thing. Here's what I'd say. I agree. But in the end, the the LIV and PGA issue, that really boiled down to, okay, the money, we can all make more money if we do this, right? So ultimately it was a financial decision, right? And here, when Kevin's point about integrity of the game is also a financial decision, right? Because the betting, the online betting is making a lot of money for the league. If that's ever undermined at all, even just in appearance, then that could affect their bottom line. So that's a financial decision too, to some degree, if that makes sense. So I do think ultimately there's money's a motivating factor in multiple ways here, and that's what it boils down to. It doesn't boil down to, I think, optics as much as just what's going to affect us financially. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Steven, thanks for hanging in for a few more minutes with us there. I know we kept it pretty long, and we'll see you later today.
All right, guys. See you soon.
Stephen Holder, ESPN.com. Will Haskett talk more on the Saudi PGA Tour front in a few. Let's do a quick morning check-down.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Game 3 tonight, NBA Finals, 8:30 tip from South Beach. Denver, a 2.5-point favorite in that one. Doesn't sound like Tyler Hero will be back for Miami. There were some rumors about him potentially getting back for this Game 3, but goes without saying, 1-1. It is a monumental one tonight.
I'm telling you, now I'm going to say this 4 more times and keep changing it depending on which way the wind's blowing. Winner tonight wins the series, right?
As much as I would like to, counter that, I think you're right. And honestly, Jake, I don't have a great feel about the game.
Totally agree. Totally
I said
agree.
Denver in 5, and now I'm sitting here like, man, that game 2 just, oof, for some reason. I just don't feel good about it from a Denver standpoint. Speaking of basketball, Fever lose last night in Chicago, 108-103. Had a chance to win in regulation. Couldn't get one final stop. Aaliyah Boston, the number 1 overall pick, 25-11.
Major League Baseball yesterday, Reds over the Dodgers.
Don't look now, but here come the Red Legs.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. That. Means a lot.
9-8 winners.
Maturity
And
from Mark Dykton.
The future arrived last night for the Reds, right?
The future, Elly De La Cruz. Awesome atmosphere. And again, Jake, I know you probably won't love this because it's deep into some analytics. He hit the hardest hit ball for the Reds all year long last night. And I believe he had the fastest time on the base pass from a speed standpoint and the third fastest. That's of the season.
Now, the hard hit ball was at where did
Double.
it go? Okay.
Yeah, double off the wall. And then I think it was on the double where he recorded one of the fastest speeds. And then coming home from second was when he recorded the other one. So, again, a pretty unique prospect. Played third last night. Back cleanup. By all accounts, number 1 ranked prospect in Major League Baseball. So, shockingly, a somewhat exciting time for the Reds.
By the way, other scores. White Sox yesterday were winners. So, too, Red Sox over the Guardians. It was the Cardinals losing to the Rangers 6-4. Cubs losing to the Angels 7-4. Athletics 11-2 over the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Boy, I tell you, I thought about going shirt off today to celebrate that.
And the Omaha Storm Chasers over the Indians 4-2.
Is that why it rained today?
No storms in the area, so they figured they'd play baseball, right?
1:35 first pitch over at Victory Field later today. Will Haskett, I got a million questions for him. He joins us next.
To Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Will Haskett going to join us here in a few from PGA Tour Radio. Looking forward to getting his thoughts on everything that transpired here over the past 24 hours. Pretty good day for Will. I know he filled in from noon to 3. Pretty good day to have him in that seat, right?
Yeah, I don't know what happened all of a sudden. I couldn't hear you, but you got
Yeah, I would say when you're talking about golf and just the business inner workings of golf, there would be few who know better, Kevin, which is why he is a timely guest for us this morning as well, right?
Very timely. Will Haskett joins us now. Will, I've got 1,000 questions, so appreciate the time here, and I know outstanding job yesterday from noon to 3. You and Jimmy, I thought, handled it very well, and of course your knowledge second to none here from a station standpoint. Your level of shock when you saw everything transpire on CNBC of all places yesterday around 10 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, I said it on the air yesterday. I got a text from Scott Agnes that was just like, "Hey, what's going on with the tour?" or something along those lines. Like, can you believe this or something like that? And I mean, I wasn't on. I didn't have CNBC tuned in. I didn't have a rolling scroll of social media on, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" You know, I mean, this was something that had no smoke. You know, this wasn't anything where insiders, where top players, where half the actual policy board, like anybody knew. So everybody coming to grips with it at the exact same time with no leak, with no advanced story, with no anything is stunning in the first place. Like, no matter what the level of story is, and then to have it be this kind of out of the blue and what is, you know, sort of, I guess, pitched as a resolution and a path forward was shocking also. So, yeah, I mean, it was total stunned. I mean, if it had happened while I was on the air yesterday, I don't really know how I would have been able to process it. Thankfully, it happened 2 hours before we had the show. And we quickly were able to pivot from 3 hours of mock trade scenarios for the Pacers to, hey, look, I get to talk about golf in Indy in the middle of June.
It seems like, Will, to use an Indy 500 analogy, we're on like lap 2 of 200 in terms of ironing out the details of what exactly this is all going to look like. As best you understand it, we are looking at a Saudi-funded PGA Tour, or we're looking at a totally separate golf league on top of the PGA Tour with who in control? Is it the PGA Tour policy board, or is it the Saudis with Yasser I forget how to pronounce his last name, the governor of the Public Investment Fund, as the chairman and the ultimate controller of it?
Yeah, so I think it's more of the former. The only thing that really, and Jay Monahan talked about this yesterday with his limited press availability after the players' meeting, which to be a fly on the wall in that room would have been unbelievable. But the only thing he said is that they have a framework agreement, and the main crux of reaching the agreement in the first place was merely to end their mutual sort of litigation against one another, the various lawsuits and antitrust suits that have been filed and everything, and that everything else is still to be sort of worked out, and that framework still has to be voted on and approved. So, yeah, when you say we're on lap, 2, I mean, I don't even know if we've necessarily started the race to having what 2024 is going to look like, and so it's leading to sort of wild speculation. You're reading between the lines, like, whose name was or wasn't mentioned in press releases, how they're sort of structuring it. But it seems to me, if you read based off the press release, that there's going to be a for-profit combined entity between the PGA Tour, the PIF, or LIV Golf as it's structured right now, and the DP World Tour. And that for-profit entity is going to handle a number of sort of the marketing and money and rights holding sort of bases that is able to, I guess, profit off of the professional game of golf. But the PGA Tour, as a 501c6 nonprofit organization with all of its independently run tournaments and schedule, is still going to be run by the PGA Tour. It's just this for-profit entity that has all of the influx. Now, how much of that money trickles down to support the PGA Tour's model, that's all business stuff that, I don't really know about. But it seems to me that the PGA Tour has maintained much of its own level of control of its tournament and its schedule, while also creating this very beneficial combined group that is going to help fund a lot of things. And and this probably leads to a follow-up question of why that was necessary. And again, I think the ending the litigation and sort of the disruption in the game seemed to be the motivating factor from both sides. And then I think both of them were then also equally motivated to try and find a way to save or fix their products moving forward. The PGA Tour running out of money. And I think PIF, recognizing that LIV was just not being accepted as a viable golf option and trying to find a way to sort of more legitimize their investment in the game of professional golf.
Well, I look, let's go back to this. I mentioned this earlier. Will Haskett is our guest on the Payless Liquors Hotline. For me personally, and I'm offering this only for the probably less than 50% of our audience who are in the same boat as me, which is, golf viewer, but not necessarily diehard every event fan, right? Mm-hmm. I know what the racing open wheel split did in diluting the product for the average fan and hurting long-term the fan base. Now, it's a little different because that split was multi-years as opposed to this, which is all developed kind of quickly. But nonetheless, there was a clear divide for years there of like, well, that guy's a kart driver, that guy's an IndyCar driver, and then other people like, wait a minute, what the hell's the difference anyway between the two, et cetera, et cetera. Does golf run that risk at this point? Two-part question. So the first is, does confusion now run as a risk towards golf's fan base?
No, I think a lot of the motivation for these sides coming together is that they didn't want to get so far down the rabbit hole of confusing the fan base and splintering. That what we've recognized so far in 2023 is that the majors, which again, a majority of the people listening to this interview are probably only watching the majors from a golf fan standpoint anyway, but that the majors became infinitely more important to the product of men's professional golf because it's the only time you are going to see all the top players in the world playing against one another. And so in that regard, other PGA Tour tournaments and even LIV Golf to an extent couldn't maximize their draws for the PGA Tour. They couldn't satisfy sponsor and broadcast right holders' wishes because you couldn't see Brooks Koepka in a PGA Tour event. You couldn't see Dustin Johnson or Bryson DeChambeau or Phil Mickelson in a PGA Tour event. And I think LIV also expected to be able to get every single big name over to their product, and that didn't happen either. And so to avoid year after year diluting your own product by not having the best fields, this, again, agreement in principle opens the door back to allowing the two main long-standing tours, the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour, to have these players come back and play. And what that means for the rest of LIV, I think, is still a very important question. Like, is it going to be a 14-tournament series next year? Is it going to get down to, a 5 or 6 event? What's it going to be? Like, I feel like its future is much more up in the air in terms of what its schedule looks like than the other existing tours. And so the idea is that they get ahead of this, recognizing that professional golf outside of the 4 majors was not going to have an audience. And one of the things that I always think about is, and I'm not informed enough to talk about the world of tennis, but a lot of people in golf talk about tennis and the fact that outside of the 4 majors in tennis every year, the best players in the world kind of splinter all around the globe and play, 3 different tournaments in the same week. One's in DC and maybe one's in Madrid and then one's somewhere in Thailand. And outside of the majors, you never get to see all the best tennis players together. And some people who I trust say that it's kind of hurt tennis as a global sport having that. And golf just did not get down that road where its best players were being asked to choose one way or the other.
Okay, so the other question then, Will, is do you believe it will hurt golf's long-term popularity in this country, or even short-term popularity, in the fact that we have a sector of the population that utilizes sports to escape the nonstop chatter of politics? I'm only going by what people told me when they were deciding not to watch the NFL and the NBA. They didn't want politics in their sports. Right. Now we have a sport that is being run and bought by one of the biggest, depending on who you listen to, political opponents of the ideology of the foundation of this country. Is that going to hurt golf?
It's a great question. I talked about yesterday on the air. I mean, Middle Eastern money is coming. And, I think the only impenetrable bubble to that right now would probably be the NFL. I don't know how long it's going to take until you have, the PIF, or it's a head story on ESPN.com today that the Glazers might sell to a Qatari prince for Man United. It's already in soccer. It's already in F1. It's already in a number of different places around the world, and cash rules.
But I was told that this country, we have morals. Will, we have principle, right? We don't buy into.
No, we're capitalist first. Let's be honest.
Of course. I'm obvious. You realize I'm being.
I know you are.
Yeah.
I know. Look, if I think the PGA Tour tried to play to both sides. Was there enough corporate sponsorship money to then still also do the right thing? But at the end of the day, many of these players want whatever they feel like their market value is, and I think that LIV inflated what many of their market values are. But it also identified the reality that these players maybe weren't being compensated fairly compared to the rest of these giant organizations that they're trying to uphold. And then, from where the money is coming from, sure, there are going to be plenty of people that have that issue. But I said this yesterday in the air. Golf is always catered to the rich, the wealthy, an older demographic. Eventually capitalism sort of wins out in our society. And I don't necessarily think that golf's core audience is going to be turned off by the concept of money.
Again, Will Haskett with us from PGA Tour Radio. Well, I was sharing some texts yesterday with a guy who's ranked top 100 in the world, and he mentioned, and you have mentioned this a few times throughout this segment, that this still has to be voted on by the board members. Do you think there's a possibility this could be voted down by the board members?
It just depends what the structure is. If the structure is, hey, this is our tournament schedule next year, and it's going to have, this number of designated events, and the purse sizes are going to this, it kind of goes back to Jake's question. By what are you going to, if you vote it down, what are you voting against? You're voting against playing opportunities with more money. You're voting against your livelihood for, on the basis of moral grounds, on the basis of we weren't told about this at the very beginning. I understand that makes a lot of emotional sense in the moment, but if the motivation yesterday was truly to save the structure of the PGA Tour the way that it was and maintain the same level of playing opportunities with more money, I just can't see a majority of the players being like, oh, yeah, I vote no to this. We want to go back to the old way where we were literally running on reserves to try and stay afloat in this competitive landscape. It's a tough pill to swallow, I think, for a guy who maybe isn't a top 20 or 30 player in the world. But then when you really step back and think about it, it's like, well, I want to be to that level. And if I get to that level, it's great. And this is the only way that supports an opportunity for me to go and play for millions of dollars every week. I just don't know what the alternative is that they're going to come up with. So I think over the long course of time, when there's actually a tangible plan in place, that, yeah, I think that they're going to vote for it. I think it's very easy to have a knee-jerk reaction to not being told anything yesterday, which is a completely justifiable anger. But it's going to be months before there's something for them to even consider. And at that point in time, their livelihood and their long-term survivability is probably more at the front of their mind than how they felt they were treated yesterday.
Well, I always ask you kind of a stupid Tiger Woods question, so I'll apologize up front for it. But I'm sure you have a feeling that it was coming. All right.
No, he's not playing in the U.S. Open next week. He's not. He's still recovering from surgery.
I cannot wait for LICC next week. Better chance Tiger finishes top 5 in another major in his life, or the public investment fund owns an NFL team in the next 2 decades?
Oh, wow. 2 decades is a pretty wide margin. I'll say the latter to that one. 2 decades is a long time. I brought this up on the air yesterday. If you are the Ursays and you decide you want to sell tomorrow and your market value is 5 and the public investment fund of Saudi Arabia offers you 10.
Sure.
You walk into the meeting with your fellow owners and they're like, we're going to turn this down out of principle. It's like, you'd be furious if you're the Ursay family. I'm not saying that they wouldn't or wouldn't. This is just me, speculating with that, but it could totally happen. That's a drop in the bucket to them.
I think
And
the
we just saw
NFL will
what the
hold on
Commanders
longest. I think the NFL will hold on longest, but Major League Baseball, I could see it happening, in the next 5 years.
I mean, I said yesterday in the air too. It's like if the public investment fund decided that they think they could make a significant amount of money with an investment into the NHL, they could probably buy the entire NHL right now if they wanted to. I mean, you know what I'm saying? They can go to every single owner, and they have the cash to be able to make that happen. Like, I mean, just think about that for a second. It'd be crazy. So, yes, I believe that there are enough billionaires who recognize they can make a lot more money in the NFL, and that sort of boys club, to steal a worse phrase, is probably as tight as anyone could be. But if they want to outbid you, they can outbid you.
You know, Will, to me, and this is the cynic in me, I agree with your statement. Golf, we'll use golf as the example. Golf is a sport that largely, and Tiger Woods gets a lot of credit, obviously, for expanding the horizons of golf. But traditionally speaking, golf was a sport that was dominated by people who liked it because it was the sport of the exhibition of wealth or of capitalism or of money, right? Mm-hmm. And yet a lot of those players, when they got done playing golf, liked to have a cigar and a drink because they loved the fact that they were able to show that they lived in the financial most powerful country in the world. And now they basically are saying, well, I mean, it's cool that the Saudis are going to take over our sport because they're going to do it everywhere. And yet that shows right there that exhibition they believed in is now a myth.
Yeah, well, I think a big part of it, though, Jake, is it's the concession to the reality.
Right, that's what I mean.
You know, a year ago, right now, we're in it. Like, we're going to go to all the sponsors and we're going to put our hand out and say, look, we need to double up because it's the only way we're going to be able to compete. And I will say this for Jay Monahan's sake, like he has said from the very beginning, like we cannot financially compete, but we're going to do our darndest to create a product that at least entices our players to stay for the right reasons. And we didn't even make it. We made it almost exactly 1 year to the week that everything kind of blew up last year, and they started to realize that it was untenable with the legal fees, with the additional purses, with all of the expenses that were sort of coming down. And this is sort of the only way forward to try and keep the sport kind of afloat. And yeah, you're right. You're resigned to it, and I would love to sit here on a moral high ground soapbox and say that there's a way forward and that everybody should say no. But again, the money sort of talks. And to sort of go back full circle, like,
I get it.
I would hate it if the PIF came and bought one of our Indianapolis franchises. But, you know, hey, KB, if the Saudis bought the Colts and then they rolled out a $600 million contract to DeAndre Hopkins to give us some wide receiver help, would you be okay with that? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's like...
Might have to play some Ballard audio for that.
Yeah, that's right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean... It's such a weird time to be alive as a sports fan.
Yeah, that's well said. Well, if you don't mind, I've got two quick ones. Hopefully, before we hang up, and appreciate the time. You've been outstanding. This might be a dumb question. If Brooks Koepka doesn't almost win the Masters and then win the PGA Championship, does this happen as soon as it's happened?
I don't think so, because according to Jay Monahan, they've been meeting for 7 weeks to sort of broker all of this.
Right, and 7 weeks goes back to the Masters. I don't know. I'm kind of, maybe I'm giving Brooks too much credit, but it seemed like that gave some credence to LIV at a time when the ratings weren't there. Players were, behind the scenes whispering about, I don't know if I love it. People in their structure were leaving their organization, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it just showcased that it was how divided the sport was beyond those weeks. We've talked about it on the show before. I don't think Brooks was up there waving a LIV flag.
Sure.
It just was then after the fact, people were like, well, man, it kind of stinks that these are the only weeks we're able to see this. And I think both sides recognize that. I think that that's what needs to kind of be. This isn't necessarily like LIV has won and has bought the PGA Tour, or fully that the PGA Tour is coming in with their tail between their legs. I do believe that they both said, look, we don't believe that we can survive effectively moving forward our own separate ways. And they came to the table and figured out a way, at least in principle, to try and make this a go together.
Yeah, a bit of a knife to a gunfight. Okay, and then last one, the schedule moving forward for the PGA Tour, as best you are to guess about it. Are we thinking more global, more team events, more 54-hole events? We're not touching the majors. Is that kind of the general thought here?
My thought is nothing changes in the PGA Tour schedule the way they were going to build it moving forward next year, which is this combination of 3 non-designated events and then 2 designated events. The only question that I think is the larger one is how large is LIV's schedule, and then how does it work? Because if you're now in this partnership, I can't foresee a scenario where the PGA Tour and LIV have 2 full field or full events sort of running next to each other. So does it become an exhibition in the fall? Does it become do you work in some sort of weeks to sort of do it? These are all huge questions that we just don't know. But in listening to the words the commissioner said last night, I think you would expect to see the same PGA Tour schedule. It may not be 44 events next year, but upper 30s to around 40 tournaments, and then figuring out a way for LIV, who a lot of these players are taking victory laps on LIV, and there was nothing mentioned yesterday on their social media channels or through those press releases that gives us any assurance that LIV even exists next year. So, who knows on that one? But right now it feels as if the PGA Tour schedule is far more locked into being very similar to what it was going to look like than anything from the LIV Golf standpoint.
600 million seems rich for DeAndre Hopkins, right?
Sure, but when you're literally making $1 billion a day in interest, does it really matter?
It's
200 million seemed rich for Phil Mickelson and Bryson DeChambeau, etc. Well, terrific yesterday, noon to 3. Terrific with us right now. Appreciate that.
See you guys.
Will Haskett, PGA Tour Radio.
If you had 600 million a year, what would you do with it?
I don't even know where to begin.
Still showing up for 7 to 10.
Yeah, still grinding away here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Eating Long's Donuts and throwing back a few beers on occasion.
If I hit for 600 million, I have wonderful news for the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
We have anything of a new title for the show?
I don't know who would feel richer, me or the two of you.
Would we share in that joy is what you're saying there? 9 o'clock hour, we'll get in a little bit in some Pacers conversation. Huge draft workout coming today.
You're listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
It's the 9 o'clock hour in Indianapolis. Technically speaking, it's the 9 o'clock hour everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query. Kevin Bowen here as well. Mark Dykton playing all the money hits. What's that, Mark?
I said hello.
This is Kevin and Query, which, by the way, my understanding is 6 months it took him to come up with the name of that show. On 93.5, 107.5, The Fan. I was looking yesterday after, and we're going to get into who the Pacers are going to see today. But when it comes to mock drafts, as I have always said, mostly they're good for being mocked. But they give you a pretty good idea of just where players slot and who is moving up, who's moving down. And I looked at one for Yahoo Sports, which I think personally, when it comes to the NBA, Yahoo is pretty reputable, has a pretty good idea what's going on. And I got curious about some of the Pacer picks and where players are kind of slotting in terms of the Pacers. So without further ado, with the 32nd pick in the 2023 Yahoo Sports Mock NBA Draft, the Indiana Pacers select Trace Jackson Davis from the University of Indiana. Again, I heard his workout went very well with the Pacers. He apparently did not shoot the ball well in a couple of his other workouts, but including at the Combine. But I heard he did shoot the ball well for the Pacers. And again, as I was told, the kind of the narrative was he did very well what he does and showed great improvement in other areas. But that position, and I do think that he has something that the Pacers could utilize. Your point is well taken, Kevin, that they have players at that position on the roster already. But take me through who the Pacers are going to see today in their workouts.
Yeah, these are probably my two favorites of the realistic group at 7. 2 individual workouts today. The first one that was announced yesterday will be with Taylor Hendricks out of Central Florida. 6'9" guy. Probably more of kind of your ideal 4 next to Miles Turner. Can stretch the floor, shot 40% from 3 last year. I think that is a really, really attractive number. But more importantly, big wingspan, big-time defender, and can kind of switch on that end. The questions about him on why he maybe isn't even higher than in this general range is, people feel like maybe he's not necessarily a great playmaker, not a great driver, not taking guys off the dribble. Again, Jake, I'm okay with that. You have a Halliburton, you have a Mathurin. I don't necessarily think you need that. Sure, you would love an even more well-rounded prospect, but if you can get the old kind of 3-and-D and put that at the 4 position, especially from kind of a switchability standpoint, I like that out of Hendricks.
This is a really esoteric name, perhaps. He reminds me of Derek Favors. I don't know if you remember Derek Favors.
Sure. I think body type, I could see that. I think a little bit more perimeter
Probably
oriented.
a little more athletic, but, Favors, just like his size.
Yeah, I don't think Favors ever shot it anywhere near what Hendricks.
Yeah, I mean, the game has evolved a little bit since Favors came into the league.
Shot it. But I could see kind of the taller, lankier body types. The other guy that they're bringing in today is Jarris Walker out of Houston. Again, would probably play the same position as a guy like Hendricks, probably in that 4 spot, but a much different body, 230 pounds. I mean, when you watch Houston this year, he just stood out like, wait a minute, that dude is a freshman?
He seems to be the most common linked to Indiana.
Yeah, a little bit, again, of a thicker body, really long wingspan, over 7 feet. I mean, if you play for Kelvin Sampson, you certainly have got to bring it on the defensive end of the floor. Not as consistent of a shooter as a guy like Hendricks, so that is something you question. But I would say probably a little bit more on the defensive end, on the rebounding side of it. A thing that I really liked about Mathurin last year is in that second-round game when Arizona was on the ropes with TCU, Mathurin went into kind of takeover mode and was outstanding in that second-round game that got Arizona into the Sweet 16. I think they actually played then Houston in the next round. But, in a big-time stage, he really delivered. Jarris Walker in the tournament, again, I know Houston didn't get on as deep of a run as they wanted. He wasn't necessarily the lead scorer for them. But against Auburn in the second round, when they were, again, on the ropes, he had 10 rebounds and 6 blocks. Against Miami in the Sweet 16, he had 11 rebounds and 4 blocks. So in their biggest games of the season, a 6'8 guy, double figure in rebounds, and had 10 blocks in those 2 games. So those are some defensive kind of areas where obviously the Pacers struggle in big time, and that is something that I like out of Walker. So I would say Walker, the question is, again, does he give you enough offensively? Is he, liability's probably too harsh, but can he hit the open jump shot consistently enough in the NBA? I think he was 34% from 3 in college. Whereas with Hendricks, you're probably getting a little bit more from a 3-point shooter, but there is a little bit more of a question on just, again, how dominant of a defender. I think a lot of people feel like Walker can switch, can guard a lot of spots, can be a good rebounder, and obviously those are areas the Pacers have struggled in.
This from David on Twitter. University of Indiana, again, for those new to the program, David Stern, for whatever reason, every time a player from Indiana was drafted, said University of Indiana. So that's like an inside baseball joke. My apologies. Also, and Mark, this one falls on you. You're not in David's criticism of the show. You are not immune, buddy.
Okay.
Wasn't that the NFL sounder for a draft pick?
If you watch the NBA draft, they use the same sound.
Are you positive on that?
100%.
How sure are you on that?
100%.
Can you cite an example?
100%.
Show your work?
It's the same TV channel, right?
Yeah.
ESPN?
Yeah.
Isn't the NBA draft on TNT?
No, ESPN. Fran Fraschilla is explaining how the international prospect. Oh, we got grainy film from Fran and Woj, and wasn't Bill Simmons on the telecast?
Which is more commonly used in the NBA draft? Length or upside? Or wingspan?
Yeah, I would say wingspan.
How about high motor?
Wingspan. It's real. And age. I feel like the NBA is much more about age than in the NFL.
Correct. Because every player's like, and this is the other thing I find funny. He's 19.7.
Yeah,
what?
Literally.
Does that mean, now here's my question. If you're 19.7, does that mean that you are 70% the way through the year? Or are you 19 and 7 months? Because they're different, right?
I think it's the 70% through the year, right?
You think so?
I could be wrong on that. Should it matter at all, Jake, that, you know, for a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis, if the Pacers were to select him, again, we're getting into age, would it matter at all that Isaiah Jackson is 2 full years younger than him?
It's a very fair and a really good question.
Which is kind of crazy to think about.
I know, but I think a lot of it has to do with cost. Quite frankly, if you get Trayce Jackson-Davis and you take him 32nd, then he's a second-round pick, non-guaranteed money, lesser value, and so I don't know that the Pacers are in cost-saving mode or free-up cap space mode. But when you know that you're going to have to eventually re-sign Halliburton, Mathurin, in time, those guys, then you want to try to get as many players on, lesser contracts as possible. Of course, if Trayce Jackson-Davis shows out and turns out to be a great player, then you renegotiate. Now you're back to square one. I mean, I get it.
Can I show my work real quick?
Yes, please do. This is David Stern.
With the first pick in the 2019 NBA Draft, the New Orleans Pelicans select Zion Williamson.
Now, hold on. Play the sounder again, though. Off that. And then play the one that you play.
It's the same one.
Well, it's the same jingle, but it's
just louder. That's all.
I guess you're right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Boy,
David, what do you got to say now, bud?
Stick it, David.
Just when I think
check your work, man.
We were done with this stage of our young children's lives. Maddie just sent me a picture that Rosie has gotten into the storage at home, and this is what she's pulled out, Jake.
Dead mouse.
Let's see. Hold on. I can't see my. He's got to unplug.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta.
Okay, the storage.
Dead mouse.
Oh, perfect. Now, wait a minute. Did she put that on herself?
We're not fully there yet, but I think it was demanded that she put it on.
Wait a minute. The storage. Now, this appears to be fitting her just fine.
I know, but,
So why was this in storage and not already displayed? I'd like to know. Please offer an explanation.
Well, it had gotten a few stains on it. I felt like she had
Has it
migrated
ever
to some
been
other
worn?
clothes. It has definitely been worn. I'm shocked it still fits her like that.
And this is, please elaborate.
This is Uncle Jake's purchase of a Clemson dress. So picture a purple dress with a little orange paw on the left part of the chest. And yes, Rosie Bowen currently rocking that here on this Wednesday morning. God, unbelievable.
Heck yeah.
I thought we were done with that.
Yeah.
And Max wore his Barcelona sweatpants yesterday, by the way. So literally, Jake is clothing my children here in the last 36
Now just
hours.
wait, because the next trip I'm taking is Amsterdam, and wait till you see what I bring back to
hopefully
kids.
nothing from the red light district would
Maybe
be
a mule
would be preferred on that end.
Look, these gummy bears are unbelievable.
Rosie's a
smell.
big fan of gummy bears on that
That
end.
would be a fun show, though.
I would be totally content 2 weeks from Thursday if the 7th overall pick came from one of these two names in the workout. I think it fits what the Pacers need. I know there is an audience out there that says that is too narrow-minded. It's too short-sighted. You're not swinging enough for the fences. The Pacers are drafting 7 overall. You need to try and hit the biggest home run possible. I think you're starting to fit pieces into the puzzle.
I would agree with that latter part. Totally agree.
And I still think these are talented dudes. I don't want to act like these are just like, glorified role players, but not everybody can score 25 for you.
Kevin, if you look at the two best Pacer teams that we've had in the NBA era here, you had the one where you had David West, George Hill, Paul George, Lance Stevenson. Who's the other starter I'm missing? Somebody help me out here.
Hibbert?
And Roy Hibbert. Hibbert, I believe, was a draft night trade. Lance Stevenson was a second-round pick. Paul George was a pick that when he was selected, people were like, who? George Hill, they traded Kawhi Leonard for his right. I get that, but I don't know that anybody knew that Kawhi Leonard was going to be that. David West, a free agency signing. Okay? The other greatest Pacer team would be Reggie Miller, Rick Smits, Derek McKee, Mark Jackson, and Jalen was part of that mix as well. Who am I missing on that group? Oh, Dale Davis. Reggie Miller drafted, Rick Smits drafted. Derek McKee was traded for, and when they traded Detlef Schrempf for him, it was like, what in the world are they doing? I mean, people were livid. Mark Jackson, they traded away. They had Mark Jackson, traded him, then traded back for him. And people were like, what are they doing? So my point being that individually, oftentimes with moves of a player, you go, that guy, why are they going after that guy? But then when you slot him in with the other pieces around, you go, I get it. It works now. And I agree with you, Kevin, that I think that's where they are with this draft pick. It may well be a player that people are like, what are they doing? And then when you pair it with and watch it grow organically with Isaiah Jackson and Benedict Mathurin and Tyrese Halliburton and, a guy that I was talking to Mark Monteith last night, I ran into him, a guy that we don't even talk about that I think is another piece that gives him some flexibility, Aaron Nesmith, who's a good wing defender, somebody that slots in with what those guys bring to the table and offsets what they don't bring to the table. That's where they are right now, as opposed to just, let's just go out and get another player, because they have good young players. And it's interesting. I mean, Monteith and I were saying, we're like, man, Nesmith is one that has kind of made Duarte expendable, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are questions about Duarte and Isaiah Jackson's future.
Yeah.
And, just a couple of years ago, I mean, when they were drafted, they both had promising moments in their rookie seasons. It is quickly how it kind of all can unfold for them. I was thinking about this tonight with Miami, and again, Game 3 right here on our airwaves coming up at 8:30. The Miami Heat is 13-year-old Kevin Bowen looking in the mirror and thinking to himself, I could have sworn I got rid of that zit yesterday.
Excuse me?
That's the Miami Heat. They are the puberty pimple for Kevin Bowen. That's what they are.
Yeah.
And Jessica Smith won't talk to me in the locker bay at Clay Junior High. And why is that? Well, probably Kevin, because you think you got rid of the zit and it's back again. I mean, they just lurk. I thought they were done. I thought in game 2, once Denver got that lead on them, I thought, boy, Denver's going to win this going away. It's 2-0, and they can probably pack some brooms on the plane to Miami. And now I sit here looking at tonight, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the Heat might just do it again at home, and they might win this series in 5 or 6.
Kevin, the Miami Heat, in terms of a series, that's how they are in games. Because in a series, you look at it and you go, well, they're done. And in games, it's like that. You turn on you go out to dinner, you do whatever, you come home, it's 9 o'clock, oh, the finals are on, you turn it on, and the Heat are down 8 midway through the third. Right. Like, it's over. And then you go and you do something, you come back, and the Heat are down 3 with 3 minutes to go in the third. And you're like, well, I mean, Denver's going to make a run here. And then you go do something, you come back, and the Heat have tied it up with 9 minutes to go in the game.
How about this?
And then they're up 3, and then they're up 5, and then they're up 11, and you're like, wait, but what's going on here? It's crazy.
To that point, this stat from ESPN, the Heat's scoring difference in each quarter in the playoffs. They're -1 in the first quarter. They're -11 in the second quarter. They're -12 in the third quarter. So if you add all that up, they are combined -24 going into the fourth quarter of games in the playoffs. In the fourth quarter, +90. They have outscored their opponents in the fourth quarter of the postseason by 90 points. It's the third best fourth quarter point differential in playoff history. +90 in the fourth quarter. Did you have acne back in the day?
Not terribly. I never had to do like the Accutane or anything like that.
Yeah, I did a little topical action.
The Stridex wipes were a staple in the Dykeman household.
Do you pop it or does that make it worse? Yeah, I always fought it.
Now I still get the occasional like.
Does Tyler Hero have acne?
I think right now like I get ingrown hairs every once in a while from a shaving nick. That's a bit of a detriment.
Oh, I thought it was from the 32 bottles of cologne that you pour into your pores.
64 bottles. No cologne today, though, just so you know. Didn't shower this morning. That's why I'm wearing a hat.
Do you think we get Chris Ballard here in a few hours to talk about Isaiah Rodgers, or will the Colts say it's under investigation, no comment, Shane Steichen will answer questions about the spring offseason program?
Latter.
I feel like, though, that Isaiah Rodgers identified himself. I mean, you could say it's an investigation, which is true, but, like, the guy identified himself. It's not an unknown Colts player where you could probably use that as a crutch.
Something I could see Ballard doing is I cannot talk specifically about the player, but I can talk about how we educate our players from a gambling standpoint.
Yeah.
Like kind of taking this, hey, this is an opportunity to be very public about it and to kind of give our players a little bit of shockwaves in the media with that. I could see him going down that path. Again, there's an NFLPA aspect to this that I know you want to be cautious with, but I could see Ballard going there.
When I say I don't think he'll address it, and again, this hasn't necessarily always been my normal routine here, but I'll defend him here. I kind of get it. I don't know what I am under the assumption, Kevin, that until the NFL comes out with a definitive statement and or discipline, it's probably in the Colts' best interest to not comment on it, right? From a legal standpoint.
Yeah, that's probably true. Can you go around that a little bit? We'll see. To Mark's point, I mean, Isaiah Rodgers has rather admitted to it and certainly did not try and downplay and or counter any of the reports that were out there. So we'll see. That's coming up in a few hours. I'll be out there again, the Colts' third open OTA session of the spring.
I will be curious of that, but I'm going to guess that they come out and say, listen, we know that you guys have a lot of questions, and the reality is at this point we are still gathering all of the evidence, and we are awaiting, we're really kind of handcuffed until the league tells us what they have found out, and so it's in our best interest to not address it until that time. If you have any questions about OTAs, and then the first couple questions will be about it, and they'll again, guys, listen, You guys know as much as we do. I know that that's uncomfortable, but it's just the reality. I mean, right now, what we're worried about is the guys that are in this locker room today, and those guys in this locker room today they're out there, they're flying around, they're making plays, they're doing what they can, and we support our teammates, our brother, and it's a difficult situation. But just again, until we have any definitive clearance and clarity from the NFL, I just don't think that we can discuss it at this time. And then
I know we got the pop quiz in a few.
That pretty much sounded exactly like the script, didn't it?
Yeah, that was pretty good PR 101, I think. We got the pop quiz in a few. If we have time today, maybe I'll hit on this story. Are you familiar with Jimmy Dunn, Jake, at all? And his relationship with the PGA Tour / the 9/11
Jimmy
story?
Dunn, my buddy Mike Dunn, when we played at the YMCA, his dad Dave Dunn was the coach, and Jimmy Dunn, his older brother, was a hell of a player at North Central, JV player. Used to shoot the ball a lot at Greenbrier Elementary School. I was mesmerized by his shooting ability, about 6'4", thin guy, good player. Couldn't figure out why he wasn't on varsity, but Jimmy Dunn liked him. Yeah, he's a nice guy. Same guy?
I don't believe so. D-U-N-N-E? Would that be the same spelling for you?
Sorry. They dropped Pat Sajak took the vowel back.
Yeah, Jimmy Dunn. Again, if we have time here, we'll share a little bit on that. I would highly encourage anyone out there just how wild this PGA Tour Saudi story is to look into Jimmy Dunn's background. Again, his story of 9/11 is rather movie-like. And now the fact that he is, by all accounts, one of the central figures in the finances of this deal, it's rather wild to me. Rather wild. So, yeah, if anyone out there has the time today, I'd encourage you to look into that. If not, we'll try and share it here in a little bit. Pop quiz in a few. Morning checkdown time.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Someone has turned down Saudi money. That would be Lionel Messi coming to the MLS. Inter Miami is where he's headed.
Wasn't that rumored?
You mean Inter Miami into the equation, or
No,
INTER?
INTER.
Not Inter Milan either.
No.
The soccer team.
No, Miami. Fort Lauderdale. So Miami has got the Heat.
Look at that. 4
They've got
straight
the Panthers,
nights and boom.
You got Messi coming.
Okay, let me pardon my naivete here.
It's kind of a LIV Senior Tour move,
To
right?
a soccer enthusiast, Messi is he like in his twilight? Is this David Beckham to LA, or is he still like?
I mean, I would say
he's on the
still,
15th or 16th hole, right?
Yeah, but he's still.
I mean, wasn't this his last World
three
Cup?
most popular player? He's only 35.
Right.
Popularity.
Yeah, he was great in the World Cup, right?
Popularity and style of play, though. Mm-hmm. Two different debates. We mentioned earlier the French player that's going to the Saudi team. Was it Karim Benzema, Mark? Is that the other one?
Yes.
And he signed a really healthy deal.
3 years for like $643 million.
So right now, you have, 3 of the top 10 or 12 players potentially on Saudi soccer teams in the world, and Cristiano Ronaldo probably falls into a Messi category of style or popularity more than style of play. But soccer money, a lot of it Saudi related.
Saudi money in general, right? NBA Finals, you mentioned it tonight, Game 3. Series tied 1 game apiece in Miami, 8:30. Is Messi going to be at the game?
I mean, that'd probably be a good PR look, wouldn't it? Front court, dabbing up Jimmy Butler.
Dropping the puck tomorrow at the Panthers game.
Yeah.
Going to the villages to have a little wine and dine, happy hour.
Things get messy there. Again, Game 3 tonight. Winner tonight wins the whole thing. Major League Baseball yesterday. Reds over the Dodgers 9-8.
Play it, Mark, again.
Don't look now, but here come the Redlegs.
They are firmly in the middle of the National League Central now.
Firmly in the middle.
That's right.
Hang the banner.
Well, that is a banner for them. Scotty Johnson just walked in completely decked out in he looks like UL Washington, in his Kansas City Royals outfit. He does not have his toothpick. That is correct. Royals yesterday, though, on the short end against the Marlins, 6-1. Lionel Messi also at that game. Indianapolis Indians 4-2 losers to the Omaha Storm Chasers. Cardinals, by the way, and Cubs both lost yesterday as well.
Elly De La Cruz, the major league debut for him yesterday on the Reds front. So, shockingly, some exciting times for the Redlegs. Fever lose a close one last night. They had a chance. Aaliyah Boston with a putback with about 3 seconds to go. They couldn't get one final stop, though, and then lost in overtime. Is it the Chicago Sky?
Chicago Sky. Yep.
108-103 in OT. Aaliyah Boston with 25-11. Safe to say she has lived up to the hype so far here early on. And as we mentioned earlier, I'll be off to the Colts here coming up in a little bit for the third open OTA session. We'll see if there's any news on that front from those positions of authority. Pop quiz time? 317-239-1070.
Scotty, what are we looking at in terms of
difficulty? Took a look at the answers. A bit of a variety, right?
Scotty just said an 8.
Some baseball, some IndyCar, dare I say tennis? Yes. Jake, can you name one player left in the French Open men's or women's draw?
Sam Querrey.
Gosh, I wish. No American, right? In the men's? I think there's one. Is Coco Gauff still in the women's?
I believe so.
I think Djokovic is still around,
Nastasi, is he still in it? Nastasi, is he out?
Nastasi's out.
Okay.
Pop quiz, 317-239-1070.
handle the pressure. Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with Kevin and Query. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
All right, time for the Pop Quiz. 317-239-1070. Jake, how much money do you think Roger Penske would need to see from the Saudis for them to buy the IndyCar?
It's a really good question.
Would they have interest?
Also a really good question. I have no idea. I have a general idea what it cost him to buy IndyCar. $1 billion? I'm totally spitballing. I mean, Roger Penske may be like, hey, I have no interest in selling it. I think Roger Penske is more interested in having a legacy for his for Gregory Penske to be able to carry on that. So I think that's probably more important to him. But, I mean...
The Indy 500 from Riyadh.
Somebody asked me this the other day. And I passed this along to you, I think, off air. What happens if, and I'm not going to say any names because I don't want it to be... This is strictly a hypothetical. Somebody presented it to me, and I thought, you know what, that's actually a decent question. What if a beverage company, not an alcoholic one, but some sort of beverage company, came to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and said, you know what, the milk thing is cool, but we're going to pay you $15 million a year to drink our beverage in Victory Lane?
Yeah, like Red Bull, I think is what you brought up on it. Yeah.
What would they do?
Yeah. Yes. Money wins. Haven't we learned what have we learned in the last 24 hours? Tradition doesn't matter. Legacy doesn't matter. Sounds good. It's money. Money, 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 especially for sports organizations that have questions about their long-standing financial
I remember when the LIV thing
presence.
happened, and I'm not saying you were wrong, so I'm not saying this to pick on you. I remember when the LIV thing happened, and you were like, well, good for them. I mean, they're going to be, on YouTube or something? We'll never hear from these guys again. I'm putting words in your mouth, but that was kind of the tone that I think most people thought, right?
Right. And I think from a competition standpoint, we never heard from them. Like, no one watched that golf. No one paid attention to the events. But they had just pools and pools of money, and that's what wins. So, yes, to your point about would the Victory Lane drink change if someone brought that amount of money? Yeah.
Man.
Am I wrong?
I mean, I'd like to say you are, but
And that sounds like me with golf, doesn't it?
I get it.
Yesterday was a reminder of I should not live in fairy tale. That's what yesterday was a reminder for me. And I'm very curious, and I know we got to go to the pop quiz, but I'm very curious, going back to our Will Haskett conversation. Jake, yesterday we had a press release that announced nothing in terms of details. Nothing. Just a agreement in principle that still needs to be voted on by a board. We have no idea what the schedule looks like, no idea what the structure looks like. Do the LIV guys come back without any punishment? Do they have to sit out at all? Does the public investment fund say, hey, Rory, here's $200 million to keep you happy?
If the LIV group is the one that's overseeing it, why would they penalize them?
There's a legality aspect to it all that still things have to be settled. Antitrust and Department of there's so many loose ends to this. And I said to Will Haskett, we're in lap 2 of 200, right? He goes, we haven't even started the race. So this is going to be a storyline.
The thing that they need to be concerned about is that all of this, the longer it goes on and this changes and that changes and this lawyer and this antitrust and that antitrust, is that people themselves, the general public, just goes, yeah, I'm tired of this, and moves on. And I know that seems crazy because golf is very popular and I understand it, but I'm telling you, like it happened with Major League Baseball. It happened to an extent at times with the NBA. It certainly happened with the NHL. The NHL in 1994 was cusped to make a major breakthrough amongst the coveted 18 to 35 demographic, and then they went on lockout. And it people moved on, went on to something else.
Yeah, I think last thing I'll say on this before we get to the pop quiz, I think what was sent yesterday was a message from the Saudis of, and again, this is an analogy, and I know it's a poor analogy given the history of that area of the world, but they brought legit guns to a gunfight, and the PGA Tour was bringing knives. And for the most part, if the Saudis want to, they can have that advantage. Maybe not as big as an advantage as they had over the PGA Tour. They will have the better artillery in any sort of one-on-one sports league competition. Whether that's Major League Baseball, whether that's the NBA. If they want to, they'll have the advantage. It's will those leagues, will those ownership groups cave like Jay Monahan caved yesterday? That will be the question, in my opinion, moving forward. All right, it's time for the pop quiz. We have delayed it long enough. It looks very difficult to me. I'm nervous about it.
I'm telling you, the first hurdle is going to be...
Jake, a number, 1 through 8.
I will go with 8.
Mark Dykton?
Pete.
Pete!
Hey, what's going on, fellas?
Pete, what's going on with you, man?
Just heading home from the golf course.
Whoa! Early morning, Pete. Hitting balls, mowing greens, playing golf?
Yeah. No, I was playing.
Nice. Where at and what time did you knock it off the first tee?
6:45 and completed Eagle Creek today.
Now, nice. Pete, Pines or Sycamore?
Sycamore.
Great layout. First
Pete,
hole's beautiful.
How old a fella are you, Pete?
I am 58-ish, 9.
Okay. Which of the following Petes do you find yourself most relating to? Pete Dye?
Dragon, yes. Pete's Dragon. You asked me that last time.
Pete's Dragon. What about Pete Nice?
No.
Pete Newell?
Well, isn't Pete Dye? Isn't that the...
Yeah.
Yeah, Pete Dye, yeah.
Golf architect,
I was going to say,
yeah.
Pete Dye. Okay.
Sure. Pete, do you have any opinion on what happened yesterday in the golf world?
Before I even heard anything, I figured LIV would buy out the PGA.
Yeah. It's a accurate statement.
Does that bother you?
Ultimately, I think that the fans are going
to... Ooh.
Fans are going to win?
The Saudis...
That would be my guess.
Saudis hack his phone? Now, say that again, Pete. Does it bother you? Your phone dropped out. Sorry. Does it bother you what happened?
I'm thinking the fans are the ones that are going to win on that whole LIV deal because I want to see Bryson DeChambeau and Brooks Koepka play.
Yeah, I think overall that is the one of the major takeaways from yesterday. Pete, have you ever tried to run up the 15th hole at the Sycamore golf course? That's quite the hill.
Oh.
Okay.
Is that a no?
I'm sorry. You broke up and I didn't hear you. I apologize.
Yeah, it was a stupid question. We're going to move on to the pop quiz, Pete, all right?
Sorry about that.
All right, here we go. Question number 1 for you, Pete. Which race is next on the IndyCar schedule? Mid-Ohio, Toronto, Road America, or Iowa?
Straight guess. I'm going to say Mid-America.
You said Mid-America?
Yeah,
let's go with last name. He said America.
You got Mid-Ohio or Road America. Which one?
I will go with Road America.
Okay.
The Reds brought up their top prospect, Pete, Elly De La Cruz, for last night's win over the Dodgers. De La Cruz lined a double to the right center field gap for his first major league hit. How did the Reds acquire De La Cruz? A, they signed him as an international free agent. B, he was part of the trade that sent Luis Castillo to Seattle. C, he was part of the trade of Yasiel Puig to Cleveland and Trevor Bauer to Cincinnati. Or D, he was part of the trade that sent Sonny Gray to Minnesota.
Oh, my goodness. I watched the game last night. He was awesome, but...
Don't look now, but here come the Red Legs.
A lot of Spanish speaking from him. I don't know if that helps you out at all.
What were my choices again?
Yeah, international free agent, trade with Seattle, trade with Cleveland, or trade with Minnesota?
I'll go with the international.
All right, question 3. Last year's American League batting champion, Luis Arias, is currently hitting .401 for the Miami Marlins of the National League. Name the only player to win batting championships in both the American and National Leagues. You ready?
Yeah.
DJ LeMahieu, Albert Pujols, Frank Robinson, John Olerud. What's that?
Pujols, he said.
I'll go with Pujols.
Okay.
Pete, did you run into any mowers out there that early in the morning?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we had the guy cutting the greens on every tee. He cut the whole course in 3 hours.
Look at that. They should just give you the mower. You could multitask there on that.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, number 4. The Marlins have played 62 games so far this season. Name the last player before Arise to hit 400 or better through his team's first 62 games. A, Jose Altuve. B, Miguel Cabrera. C, Chipper Jones. D, Tony Gwynn.
Oh, my.
You know, that guy on the mower this morning was Clipper Jones' brother.
I'm going to go with Chipper Jones.
Okay, there we go. Question number 5. Novak Djokovic won his quarterfinal match at the French Open yesterday despite dropping the first set. It was the 45th time in his career that he won a match in a major tournament after losing the first set. That breaks a tie for the most such wins in the Open era in majors. Whose record did he break? Jimmy Connors, Roger Federer, Michael Chang, or Image is Everything, Andre Agassi?
I'm going to go with an underdog, Michael Chang.
That guy had some wild hair. Not Michael Chang, the other guy.
Yeah, and then it was all gone.
I'd love to get American male tennis back to that era.
It was great.
You know?
It was a lot of fun, man.
Don't feel like I have it all.
I would say tennis, actually, Kevin, for me, in my middle school to college years, tennis in the American landscape was the equivalent of what golf has been for you.
Really?
Because you had...
I guess that checks out.
You know what I mean? You had both Americans and international players, but you had Agassi and Connors and McEnroe and Becker and Lendl, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, Tiger Phil, obviously.
Yeah.
Tons of great international players. Pete, boy, what a hell of a Wednesday morning already for Pete here. What do you get? Road America, right? Yeah. De La Cruz, international free agent. Chipper Jones.
That is correct.
And 3 was not Albert Pujols, DJ LeMahieu, and 5, not Michael Chang, Jake.
It was Andre Agassi. Image is Everything, baby.
You don't get to come back tomorrow. You don't even get a lousy copy of our home game. You're a complete loser.
Is Andre Agassi, didn't he marry Steffi Graf? Yes. Is he still married to her? Yes. And did he marry Brooke Shields, or was he dating Brooke Shields? Married her. That's a couple of good majors there for...
Rory McIlroy is currently meeting the media. Some interesting quotes from the man that really has carried the PGA Tour's flag for the last year and was, you would think, blindsided by yesterday's news. We'll share some of those comments to end the show.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Jake, when yesterday's news broke, probably the first person I thought about was Rory McIlroy, who has been easily the most public figure in all of this. Jay Monahan, the commissioner of the PGA Tour, has really asked Rory to take a public stance, and Rory has done that for the past year, and while also obviously trying to maintain, his standing as one of the best golfers in the world. So Rory's comments, who I think is a very eloquent speaker, and I think does a really nice job of explaining, or has explained the PGA Tour stance really nicely. I was really looking forward to hearing his thoughts. A few Rory quotes from this morning on his reaction to yesterday's news. Rory on the Saudi money. I've come to terms with it. I've resigned myself to this is what's going to happen. It's very hard to keep up with people who have more money than anyone else. Rory, I still hate LIV. I hate them. I hope it goes away, and I expect that it does. Again, I think an issue there with Rory of the competition level of LIV, which is different than the public investment fund, which is the money that was funding LIV. Rory says, it's hard for me to sit up here and feel like somewhat of a sacrificial lamb. When asked if he still has confidence in Jay Monahan as commissioner of the PGA Tour, and this is courtesy, by the way, of Kyle Porter, golf writer for CBS. Kyle mentions here Rory takes a deep breath and says, I do, ...
Allow me to ask this. Is this a merger or a buyout?
That, I think, is a terrific question. Merger sounded good in the press release. Buyout, to me, sounds a little bit more of what it is. And, I asked Will Haskett that question, Jake. Are they simply funding the PGA Tour's endeavors?
Yeah. I mean, because...
Or are we getting a whole separate tour? These are the things we don't know. They released a press release with no details. We have no idea, Jake, what professional golf will look like moving forward. You have a general idea, but again, I think it'll be more global. I think there'll be some team elements to it. I think what you'll see is getting away from the meritocracy of what I've always loved about the PGA Tour. Tiger Woods was not guaranteed status on the PGA Tour. He had to earn it. Same with Jordan Spieth. Scotty Scheffler was playing in the AAA version of the PGA Tour just a couple years ago. Won a bunch of events, finished high, earned his status, went on from there. And what LIV to me is like, Jake, is LIV would be like writing a check to Elio Castroneves and saying, no matter what happens, Elio, you're in the next 25 Indianapolis 500s.
Right.
You don't have to qualify.
Right.
You're good, man. There would be no story of Catherine Legg, Kyle Kaiser,
Graham Rahal
from a few years ago.
Yeah.
Graham Rahal. Oh, your last name's Rahal? Yeah, you're good till 2060. I think this quote from Rory probably sums up where I will eventually get to. But again, I still feel a little awkward about it all. Rory goes, he has come to terms with the Saudi money in sports and golf. I see what's happened in other sports. I see what's happened in other businesses. I've just resigned myself to it. And that's probably where we're at.
Money buys a lot of complacency. Right?
Yeah, that's well said.
I mean, if you don't like something on Monday, then you might not like it on Tuesday, and you still don't like it on Wednesday, and you realize by Thursday it's probably not going away, and by Friday you start thinking about what it would be like if you had to accept it, and on Saturday you resigned yourself that you're going to accept it, and on Sunday you're like, okay, fine, let's do it, and then by the next Monday you're like, well, yeah, I mean, it was no big deal.
Probably something we can hit on a little bit more tomorrow, and I know this necessarily isn't 100% relevant with sports, but certainly downtown. I'm seeing this here from James Briggs that Indianapolis is going to be closing part of Monument Circle to traffic, redeveloping Georgia Street to make it mostly car-free by 2025. Sounds like a little park is going out right outside our office here.
Georgia Street, by the way, I still maintain is where they should do basically our equivalent of like the Canyon of Heroes, since Georgia Street was built and developed essentially for the Super Bowl celebratory areas, and they have the statue of John Wooden there. They should just link Gainbridge Fieldhouse to the path to the Dome by putting up the statues of Indianapolis sports legends. Wooden's already there. And then you have Oscar Charleston, you have Major Taylor, and you do the different legends of Indiana sports to line along Georgia Street.
I always thought that wooden statue kind of looks like something I would have created.
It's a little odd, yes.
Thank you to Will Haskett. Thank you to Stephen Holder. Again, we'll be up at the Colts complex here in a bit. See if there's anything more on the Isaiah Rodgers front. Boy,